Part 41. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 406. While the two great men were confronting each other at the door, Musian also gently pulled open a corner of the quilt and glanced at the silver-haired beauty in front of the window. Then, his face was uncontrollably hot. At this stage, I actually felt embarrassed because Sister Linling was staring at me like this. This is not like me, Musian was shocked. Linglong, what are you doing here? Are you interested in this child? Yao Meng narrowed her beautiful eyes and looked at the silver-haired beauty lying on the window. Linling had silver hair and wore a thin white dress. She held up a sign in her hand, which read, I noticed that someone had solved the formation of Lianji Peak, so I came to take a look. As a result, I saw you sneaking into Lianji Peak. Yao Meng raised her eyebrows slightly and looked at Linling with a smile. The child was originally in the Yaokai Holy Land, but you used some secret methods to bring him to Lianji Peak, right? And I can't be sure whether he is safe, so I came to see. Why does it become my problem from your words? Linling nodded AAA, with a thoughtful look in her red eyes. Then she raised her hand to wipe off the words on the wooden sign, and then raised the sign again. I'm sorry. Yao Meng. It was the first time she saw such a cute and adorable Hedao master who actually apologized. Then, the words on Linling's wooden sign changed again, but, you can't bully him. He is in a bad mental state now and needs to rest. When she said this, a pair of bright red eyes looked at the boy in front of the bed curiously. Although she had seen Musian's appearance after being rewritten by the principle of time, she still felt a little strange, so much so that she couldn't help but look at him several more times. Yao Meng came back to her senses, looked at Linling with a little surprise, and then smiled. You really love him. Among the girls Musian knew, Linling was the only one who could see Musian being bullied by her and still remain so calm. When everyone saw the scene of Musian being bullied by her, they were all unhappy at first, and then they probably had similar thoughts to Yao Meng. However, the first thing Linling thought of was Musian's physical condition. Soon, Yao Meng's soft and elegant voice came again in the room, but, do you think I look like I'm bullying him? As if to confirm Yao Meng's words, Linling looked straight at Musian with her beautiful red eyes that seemed to be printed with stars, and wrote and drew on the wooden sign, do you need help? Musian subconsciously looked at Yao Meng. Yao Meng looked at him with a half-smile, her eyes seemed to say, you speak for yourself, I won't embarrass you. Do I have a choice? Musian complained in his heart. If I let them go on and wake up the sleeping senior sister. Musian barely got up and smiled, thank you, Sister Linling, but I was just joking with Yao Meng, don't worry about it. Linling looked at the frail boy in the room with doubtful eyes, and then raised the wooden sign, your spirit has not recovered yet, is it okay? Don't worry, do you think I will do anything to hurt him? Yao Meng took over the topic with a smile, and then gently pressed Musian's shoulders, let him lie on the bed, and pulled the quilt to cover him up, as if to cover up the fact that she was just planning to steal the cake. Linling nodded AAA, and there was a bit of thought in her red starry eyes. That's true. After all, Qingdi is Musian's wife, although neither of them attended the wedding in Shengwang City, in the eyes of the world, they are married. She will not harm Musian. Linling wrote and drew on the wooden sign, and then handed it to Yao Meng, when will your principle of time restore him to his original state? Yao Meng's light dress was lightly draped over her shoulders, and her full and upright chest proudly supported the green gauze dress. Her long hair was scattered like a waterfall, and it was simply tied up with a white lace, and a few strands of black hair fell down. When can he recover? She pondered for a moment, and soon a charming smile appeared on her holy and pure face, it should be soon. Linling nodded AAA, and looked at Musian twice more with concern. The cauldron in the body was not damaged at all, but the spirit was slightly tired, there was indeed no problem. Seeing Lin Ling turning around and about to leave, Yao Meng suddenly said, "Rewrite the rules here first." Lin Ling knocked her palms and said, "AAA." Something seemed to have changed in the room. Musian looked at Lin Ling's leaving figure and hesitated. "You just said that Sister Lin Ling rewrote the rules here, can the Hedeo realm also rewrite the rules between heaven and earth?" In a sense, the words follow the law, which is to modify the rules between heaven and earth. Yao Meng stared at the weak and handsome boy, and suddenly chuckled. The Hedeo realm is still affected by the rules of heaven and earth, but the spirit dragon in the Lianji sect is not considered Hedeo, but Yahua. Musian was stunned, and then seemed to remember something important, and hesitated. Are the rules in the Lianji sect made by the sect master himself? No wonder people outside say that Shang Yanfei is invincible in Lianji section. The formation blessing in Lianji sect is only part of the reason. More importantly, the rules in Lianji sect are different from the rules of heaven and earth in the outside world. In other words, the sect master's sister can exert the strength of Yahua realm in Lianji sect. Musian opened his mouth slightly and wanted to say something else, but at this time Yao Meng had already covered his mouth with her hand. She sat in front of the bed, her slender legs like jade under the green gauze skirt were crossed, and a faint smile appeared in her beautiful eyes. "Don't think about this now. Compared to this kind of thing, we have more important things to do right now, right?" The voice came softly in Musian's ears like a heavenly sound, accompanied by a faint body fragrance from under the green gauze dress, which made people feel excited. "How about next time?" Although he was a little moved, Musian still refused very reservedly. "Although the room is now covered by hypnosis, you have to know that senior sister is at the return to Void Realm and has a heavenly destiny body. What if she wakes up when he and Yao Meng are intimate?" At this time, a slender green fingertip gently stroked Musian's face. Yao Meng smiled and whispered, "Although I control the principle of time, I only have a partial understanding of it, so I need your help who is affected by the principle of time." Musian hesitated for a moment and continued, "But senior sister is still beside me." "There is more than just your senior sister beside me." Yao Meng smiled with a holy smile as kind as the elder sister next door, and the corners of her mouth slightly raised. "As long as there is no noise, she will not wake up, don't worry. The problem is that if the noise is louder later, senior sister will really wake up." "What should I do tomorrow?" Musian hesitated and was about to open his mouth to continue speaking. "If you continue to make a lot of noise and wake her up, what do you think will happen if someone sees what's going on between us?" Yao Meng asked with a smile. "You don't want your senior sister to see this, do you?" Every word she said seemed extremely kind and sacred, with a little bit of sparkling light on her skin, her crystal jade feet never touching the ground, and a little cinnabar between her eyebrows adding a bit of charm to her. This fairy-like appearance is enough to make the world who sees this Jing Emperor worship him. However, I'm afraid no one would have thought that this fairy, whether she had been silent for too long or something, now exudes a fairy charm, but if her actions were spread to Jizhu, I'm afraid it would shatter the dreams of countless people. Musian, you are like this now because of me, so, I will definitely make you return to your original appearance." Yao Meng sat sideways beside Musian, holding one of his little hands, her beautiful eyes staring at his weak and handsome face, and said softly, "Now you just need to close your eyes and study the law of time with me, and then, leave everything else to your sister." Accompanied by the gentle voice in the room, the candlelight flickered. Musian stared at her silently, his beautiful eyes were pure and charming, reflecting the firelight, like a small and exquisitely carved jade stone thrown into the clear lake, crystal clear and moving. The moment their eyes met, their eyelashes trembled slightly, and their lips were rosy and plump, like sweet and delicious tempting cherries, which attracted people's eyes involuntarily, more like a kiss. Although her appearance is beautiful, her temperament is even better, enough to make people who see her feel extremely entangled. On the one hand, he wanted to be intimate with her, but on the other hand, he secretly felt remorse for having the idea of blaspheming the fairy. Muzian had seen many peerless beauties, and had been intimate with Yao Meng several times before, but at this moment, he still couldn't help but feel a strong sense of amazement. Suddenly, the candlelight went out. Before Muzian could speak, Yao Meng had already leaned over, and under his gaze, she lowered her head and kissed his soft pink lips on his lips. Muzian was nervous at first, but slowly, he changed from being passive to being active. Even though he was only refining his spirit, and even his physical condition had some problems, he could still suppress the Qing emperor who had ascended to the sky. The sound of rain came from the room, covering up the soft and gentle voice in the room. In this quiet night, Lan Mulian, who had been sleeping soundly, frowned slightly in the dimness for some reason. After a long while, he gradually relaxed and fell into a deep sleep. Half an hour later, Yao Meng's beautiful eyes were full of affection. She slightly raised her snow-white chin and glanced at the window-sill with a charming look. I don't know when it started. A woman in a black and red dress was sitting there lazily, swinging her white jade feet, looking at the direction of the bed with a smile. But more of her eyes were on the handsome boy with a delicate temperament. I didn't expect that he would change so much after just going to Yuzhou and the demon world. The dignified Qing emperor actually forced him to be intimate with you. If it gets out, your reputation as a fairy will probably be ruined, Ye Qingxin said with a hint of sarcasm. Yao Meng raised a delicate arc at the corner of her mouth, and also transmitted the message, if it were you, would you miss it? Oh, no. Fellow Daoist Ye should not be interested in him, after all, you targeted him before dash. Yao Meng's voice suddenly stopped, and she lightly covered her red lips, looking resentfully at the young man in front of her, unable to focus on two things anymore. She raised her hand and waved lightly, and the thin curtains covered everything on the bed. The smokeless charcoal fire burned quietly, and only a graceful figure could be vaguely seen behind the gauze-like curtain. Ye Qingxin's beautiful eyebrows were slightly raised, her body seemed to be dotted with firelight, and her temperament and grace were like a fire fairy walking out of the flames. She curled her lips in disdain at this moment. Do you really think everyone is like you? But in the end, his eyes inadvertently glanced at the delicate figure of the beautiful young man under the curtain, and his beautiful eyes were filled with unprecedented light. The next day, early morning. Muzian almost had a sleepless night here, and at this moment, there were also several beauties far away in the Yaokai Holy Land who also had a sleepless night. Bai Ruoxi's beautiful eyes were dark, and Ye Lingxuan's face was gloomy, as cold as ice. Wei Mengru, on the other hand, lowered her eyes slightly. This was something she would do only when she was in a bad mood and didn't want to be noticed. Even Lan Feiying, who always smiles, looks a little unhappy at the moment. Since getting the system, her cultivation level has improved rapidly. Later, she was selected by heaven as the chosen one, swallowing up Yu's energy. Luck is in the spotlight. However, what happened last night was like a splash of cold water, making the chosen one tremble for a moment. She actually gave that guy in front of my sister. Should I say that she really deserves to be the Qing emperor? I'm afraid she is the only one in the world who can do it. However, I really want to try it myself. The Holy Maiden of Yaokai was already sitting cross-legged and meditating. However, it took her nearly half an hour just to enter trance last night. Her mind kept echoing with the charming appearance of Qing Emperor last night that could make a girl's heart beat faster. It stands to reason that if the Holy Maiden of Yaokai wants to cultivate to the realm of Hedeo, she needs to maintain a pure heart. In the past, it was rumored in the Holy Land of Yaokai that this is how the Qing Emperor entered the realm of Hedeo. But she saw a different kingdom. Moreover, such a Qing Emperor has already merged with the Tao and even ascended. This has greatly shaken the Taoist heart of the Yaokai saint, who has always been firm in her Tao. Ye Qian covered her small mouth and looked at the scene in disbelief. In fact, She pursed her lips that she couldn't help but want to raise to avoid being out of tune with the solemn atmosphere at the moment. Finally, Bairuoxi finally spoke. Staying here is not an option. Since the Qing Emperor has ascended, let's go to the Liangyi sect as soon as possible. By the way, let's go visit Mulang. In the early morning, it was still raining heavily in Liangyi section. Raindrops as big as beans fell on the ground, and the blue and white jade floor was completely white. Muzian woke up early, and Yao Meng left the room early in the morning, apparently to visit concubine Shang Yan. Muzian did not wake up his senior sister. He walked out of the room, stretched his waist and felt comfortable. Then, as if he noticed something, he glanced sideways at Ye Qingxin, who was leaning against the door with her arms crossed, and said in surprise, "Sister Ye, when did you come?" Ye Qingxin smiled brightly, "Last night." Muzian was stunned for a moment, then said calmly, "Sister Ye didn't say anything to me last night." Ye Qingxin glanced at Muzian with her beautiful eyes, "What are you telling me? Could it be that you wanted me to propose joining you in your practice last night?" "In fact, it's not impossible," Muzian smiled and said, "Sister Ye, this trip seems to have gone smoothly." Mentioning this matter, Ye Qingxin's eyes suddenly became a little weird, and she glanced at Muzian a few more times. Although she knew that Muzian had a close relationship with Ye Zhou and the master of the demon world, she still did not expect that the other party would actually agree not to interfere with the Qing Emperor's ascension because of Muzian. Now that a human emperor has appeared in Kyushu, the situation in Kyushu may be rewritten. "How did you become like this?" Ye Qingxin suddenly asked. Hearing this, Muzian felt a little helpless and explained roughly what happened before. Ye Qingxin put her fingertips to her lips and said thoughtfully, "In other words, there is something wrong with the Qing Emperor's theory of time, so when you go back in time, even your body goes back to its past state. No wonder you are like this." Muzian sighed softly, "I hope Yao Meng can let me recover as soon as possible, otherwise I won't even be able to get out of Liangyi Peak. If he wandered around the Liangyi sect in his current state, it would probably cause a big commotion." Ye Qingxin hummed at first, then couldn't help but look at Muzian a few times, and suddenly chuckled, "If you leave Liangyi Peak in your current posture, I'm afraid you will arouse the admiration of many girls." In the past, Muzian was already top-notch in terms of appearance, but now he can even be said to be a bit more charming, and it would not be an exaggeration to call him a pretty young man. "Is Sister Ye one of them?" Muzian suddenly laughed. Ye Qingxin glanced at him angrily and said lightly, "It's a shame you're still in the mood to joke." Muzian was stunned, "What does Sister Ye mean by this?" Ye Qingxin was also stunned for a moment. "Yesterday, there was an ancestral artifact in this room, and the person holding that ancestral artifact was observing everything in the room. Didn't Qing Emperor tell you?" Muzian. Silence. The rain pattered on the ground, and time passed by silently. After an unknown amount of silence, the smile on Muzian's face slowly faded, and he said, "Ancestor weapon? What kind of ancestral weapon?" He had already vaguely guessed something in his heart, but he was unwilling to admit it. There is probably only one ancestral weapon in the world that can spy on others, or even lock onto someone and bring him back to his side. It's a golden chain. If I remember correctly, it should be the wild time lock of the Forbidden Zone. As soon as Ye Qingxin finished speaking, he saw Muzian holding the door and slowly slumped on the ground. His pupils lost focus, and he looked at the heavy rain outside with a distracted look, muttering, "My life is over." So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 407. Muzian sat slumped at the door of the room, looking at the rain curtain, his fingers trembling slightly. He thinks that his multi-threaded operation has always been as stable as an old dog, but he can't resist the opponent's direct insertion of the real eye into his own base. The ghost would have thought that the lock of desolate time had been shining in this room last night. Could it be that Yao Meng didn't notice it? I didn't see any movement from her. Mu Xian's little soul was roaring at this moment, and his mentality was shattered. Seeing this, Ye Qingxin couldn't help but chuckle, and deliberately teased, "Why are you in a daze all the time? Could it be that you refine the sequelae of that drop of Deng Fairyland essence and blood?" Mu Xian raised his eyes and looked at Ye Qingxin with a concerned look. He reluctantly raised his hand and waved it gently, "No, it's okay, I just thought of some sad things." When he said this, he recalled everything that happened last night in his mind, and he couldn't help but want to go back to the house and sleep. When Lingxian and the others arrived, he would say yes, yes, yes to anything they asked. Then it was probably time to tie him up with several ancestral weapon chains and throw him into the basement. When thinking of this, Mu Xian sighed secretly. "I'm so stupid, really. I clearly knew that Sister Lingxuan's lock of desolate time locked me. Why didn't I expect that she would find a way to find me through the lock of desolate time when she found out that I was not in Yaokai Holy Land? He must have been blinded by Neza last night." Now, according to Ye Qingxin's wishes, there was an ancestral weapon lock suspended in the sky yesterday, reflecting the various scenes that happened here. Even if Yao Meng closed the curtain yesterday so that others could not see clearly, anyone who is not a fool knows what they were doing yesterday. It's fine if it's just Sister Lingxian by herself. It's okay to add Sister Qian'er, I'm sure I can appease them, but if others were watching the live broadcast last night. Mr. Mu is good at multi-threaded operations and making girls happy, but making one girl happy is different from making multiple girls happy. Besides, there is still a question whether they will listen to him after this. Mu Xian crossed his hands in front of him and fell into a short period of thinking about life. Then, he calmed down a little and looked at the beauty in red dress sitting next to him with her knees in her arms. At this moment, the ancestor of the Ye family was sitting by the door like him, wearing a fiery red dress with black patterns. Her hair was slightly soaked in red hair. Under the black skirt, she had plump and white hair. The long legs are pressed together, the jade feet are crystal clear, and lines like flowing fire rise up on the fair skin, which is breathtakingly beautiful. "Since Sister Ye knows what happened last night, don't you have anything to say?" Mu Xian suddenly asked. Ye Qingxin raised her chin, glanced at him, narrowed her eyes and smiled, "What do you want me to say? Do you want me to question why you are practicing dual cultivation with Qingdi? But you and I are not Taoist lovers, let alone we are husband and wife, so I have no reason to question, right? Qingdi doesn't know what the relationship between Ye Qingxin and Mu Xian is. Right now, Ye Qingxin is in the dark and Qingdi is in the light. There will be many opportunities to n.t.r Qingdi in the future. Naturally, she can't do the same thing as she did to stop Qingdi last night. Emperor. Although we are not Taoist couples, but... Mu Xian stared into Ye Qingxin's eyes and smiled, "But it's not a relationship between a senior and a junior, right? So even if Sister Ye questions or even punishes me for this, I have nothing to say." Ye Qingxin twirled a strand of hair with her fingertips and said calmly, "You can't do anything about what happened last night, right? The Qing Emperor ascended to heaven, and my true body is in heaven and cannot go down to the lower world. If she really wants to do something, who can it can't be stopped." "Does Sister Ye mean that Yao Meng should not be allowed to ascend?" Mu Xian asked. Ye Qingxin shook her head, "That's not to say that the emergence of the Qing Emperor will be of great help to your future. But to be honest, I didn't think she could really become immortal at first. At that time, there were ancient creatures in the Forbidden Land in Kyushu that were staring at Yaokai, but it seemed that they were frightened away by the aura you exuded in the end. It is extremely difficult to become an ascension, and it is impossible for the Qing Emperor to take care of the left and right during the tribulation. Even if there are two Hedeo realm protectors for the Qing Emperor at that time, it is a bit difficult. If Mu Xian hadn't used the drop of essence and blood that ascended to the fairy land at that time, the best result now would be that Yao Meng failed to become an immortal, and the worst result would be that she died. But no matter what, now that Yao Meng has ascended, your safety will be more guaranteed in the future, and I can feel at ease. It's just a pity that my true body is still in heaven. Otherwise, I can work with Qing Emperor to protect you in secret until you become a disciple, Ye Qingxin said with a hint of regret in her tone. Musian was silent for a moment, then suddenly said, if I say that I have a way to make Sister Ye's true body descend to the lower world, do you want to try it? Ye Qingxin was stunned for a moment and looked at Musian with some doubts. It stands to reason that there is no rule as to when the road to immortality will come to Kyushu. Sometimes the road to immortality will appear 10,000 years ago, and sometimes it will even take more than 100,000 years. Only when the road to immortality comes to Kyushu will Hideo only those with great ability can pass through the lower world on the road to immortality or ascend the road to heaven and ascend to heaven. Sister Ye should still remember the ancient coffin she got in Jiyuan, right? Musian asked. Ye Qingxin nodded slightly, then seemed to remember something and said hesitantly, through that ancient coffin, let my spiritual consciousness and my true body merge into one, and then use that ancient coffin to go to the lower world. But there are rules and order in the heavens, I'm afraid it's not so easy to let the real body go down to the world. Ye Qingxin's voice was slightly quiet, and she subconsciously looked at Musian, as if she remembered something. You can modify the rules of the heavens, if it's you, maybe you can really let my real body go down to Jizhu. Musian looked at the stunning beauty next to her and smiled, after my body recovers, I will try to welcome Sister Ye down to the world. Ye Qingxin chuckled, and a trace of expectation appeared in her beautiful eyes. It would be great if the real body could really go down to the world. When she was suppressed by the Qing Emperor's pure world Blue Lotus before, she could only watch Musian being licked clean by the Qing Emperor bit by bit, which was unacceptable to Ye Qingxin, who would avenge her. If the real body can go down to the world after this. Looking at the surprise and joy in Ye Qingxin's eyes, Musian also had a faint smile on his face. This would make this woman so happy, and it would not be in vain for him to mention this matter. But soon, Musian's smile became a little more helpless. Sister Ye's matter was settled at the moment, and it seemed that she didn't care about what happened between him and the Qing Emperor last night. But what about Sister Lingxian? What if other people were watching the live broadcast at that time? Why am I, the dignified Lord of Heaven, so miserable that I have to worry about the arrival of a few protagonists? Since I was able to operate in multiple threads in the past, even if Ruoxi and the others really saw what happened last night, I could also play with their hearts in the palm of my hand, so there was no need to panic. Musian comforted himself a few times in his heart, and then after seeing Ye Qingxin return to his natural furnace, he also stood up and planned to go back to the house to meditate and practice for a while. However, just when he turned around, he saw the beautiful woman in white dress who was standing behind him at some point, looking down at the young man from a high position. Those autumn water eyes were as deep as a cold pond. Shit, when did senior sister appear behind me? She was so silent that there was not even a sound. Musian almost lost the ability to control his expression. Without waiting for Lan Murian to speak, he smiled and said, "Senior sister, when did you wake up?" Lan Murian pondered for a moment and smiled, "Guess." Musian quietly observed senior sister's expression, and then asked tentatively, "Not long ago." Lan Murian first hummed, and then when Musian was about to feel relieved, she smiled solemnly, "Not long ago, Senior Linglong came to my room and made a lot of noise. I woke up at that time." Musian's face suddenly became dull. The back mountain of Lianji Peak. At this moment, Yao Men naturally didn't know that her actions last night had made Musian, who was always as steady as an old dog, panic. At this moment, she had turned into a green light and appeared in front of the back mountain to visit the master who had been standing in the world for who knows how long. Concubine Shangyan raised her hand and tapped her fingertips, and a cup of tea appeared on the ground of her seat. "The Green Emperor has now ascended to heaven, and many cultivators in Juzhu are concerned about your next move, worried that it will affect the future situation in Juzhu. Concubine Shangyan smiled and said, but I'm afraid no one would have thought that the Green Emperor would come to Lianji sect first. Master Shang has insight into the secrets of heaven and knows 10,000 years later. I think he should know why I came this time. Yao Meng smiled. Although I have ascended to heaven this time, a disciple in your sect was injured for me. There were some errors in the time method I controlled, which caused his body to become like this. I wonder if the master has a way to crack it. I think the Green Emperor is very satisfied with him now. Why does he still want him to return to his original state? Concubine Shangyan's voice was soft and gentle. Yao Meng raised her eyebrows slightly and said lightly, Shang Zongju may have some misunderstandings about me. If possible, I still hope to restore him to his original state. Although I married him, I don't have any special hobbies. Shang Yanfei smiled sweetly, and silence is golden. This smile always gives people a feeling of do you believe this? Yao Meng narrowed her eyes and said softly, Shang Zongju seems to have something to say. In fact, you don't have to deliberately hide it from me. Whether it's you, other female cultivators, or even me. Shang Yanfei played with the blue and white porcelain teacup in her hand and chuckled, no matter who it is, they will be attracted by him now. After all, you should have discovered that his physique is different from other cultivators, Shang Yanfei said. Yao Meng crossed his arms and frowned and said, are you referring to his chaotic body? But what does this have to do with what you just said? Most female cultivators don't know that he is a natural furnace. If they knew that Musian was a natural furnace, I'm afraid that even with the Green Emperor, it would attract the attention of countless female cultivators. Do you know what constitutions his chaos body includes? Shang Yanfei asked. Yao Meng hesitated for a moment, then, as if she had thought of something, her beautiful green eyes slightly widened. The next moment, Shang Yanfei answered for her, natural spirit body, heavenly saint body, sword immortal body protection, even the inheritance you left to Yechian, and even the natural furnace cauldron. His chaos body includes the constitutions of all the girls around him. And Bairuoxi, in a sense, also has dual constitutions. Nine-tailed fox bloodline, Yao Meng whispered to herself, then her eyes flickered slightly, and she said, you mean, he might also have the bloodline of a nine-tailed fox? Isn't this too weird? Although there are indeed male cultivators in the fox clan of the demon world, from the past to now, I have never heard of any male cultivator who can cultivate to the level of a nine-tailed fox. To be precise, both Bairuoxi and Musian are now three-tailed foxes. Shang Yanfei paused, but Bairuoxi has a special physique. If she has enough opportunities, she can evolve into a nine-tailed fox and become the first powerful person with two physiques. Yao Meng narrowed her beautiful eyes. No wonder she was attracted to Musian when she saw his body rewritten by the principle of time. It turns out that there is probably a three-tailed fox bloodline at work. It's not that she likes to practice, nor that she has a strange hobby, it's just that Musian's three-tailed fox bloodline is at work. You just passed away, and the principle of time is the law of the Great Way. It will take some time to control it. If you want him to return to his original state in a short time, I'm afraid it's not possible for the time being. Shang Yanfei showed a charming smile, but now in addition to the principle of time, there is another way to restore him to his original state. Moreover, she reminded intentionally or unintentionally, the nine-tailed fox can switch forms freely. No matter which type of him you like, he can satisfy you. Yao Meng frowned slightly and said faintly, at present, he has attracted the attention of many female cultivators. If he can really awaken the physique of the nine-tailed fox. The nine-tailed fox charms all living beings, and is at the same level as the powerful physique of the queen of the demon world. If Bairuoxi's physique can really be shared with Musian, the future Musian can really become a beautiful boy, with the same charming way as the nine-tailed fox. Add to that the natural furnace, what's going on? Shang Yanfei's dark golden eyes revealed a faint smile. Anyway, she is already a beauty that brings disaster, so what if she is more charming? The sound of rain outside the house was getting louder and louder, and Yao Meng's originally frowned brows gradually relaxed. That's true. Anyway, Tianchen gliding has already attracted many vixens. Even if Muzian can really awaken the charming physique of the nine-tailed fox in the future, what can it do? It's nothing more than attracting more female cultivators' attention, which is fine if you think about it carefully. Of course, that's what he said, but whether to try taking Tegzudan, let him decide for himself. I didn't expect that the senior sister had woken up last night, which means that she saw everything Yao Meng did last night. No, the senior sister may not have seen it, but at least she heard it. In the afternoon, Muzian held an umbrella, exhausted physically and mentally, and walked in Lianji Peak to relax. The senior sister was angry, the kind that is hard to coax. If Yao Meng hadn't been here, she might have already used one of the rewards given by the sect master to the winner of the Ascension Conference, the teleportation talisman. If I used the teleportation talisman in that closed basement, I would probably have to meditate in the basement for a while. Muzian sighed in his heart. Lingxuan's sister's affairs have not been resolved yet, and now there is another senior sister. Fortunately, it will take at least 1 day and 1 night from Yaokai Holy Land to Lianji sect, and I can still think of a way during this period. I will find time to talk to my senior sister in the evening. After relaxing for a while, Muzian returned to the guest room alone. When he was lying on the bed, he suddenly heard the door creak open, and Yao Meng, who had just returned, stood outside the room. Has Sister Qingdi found a way? Why does she look so happy? Muzian asked. The principle of time is understood from the Tao, and it may be difficult to completely control it in a short period of time. Yao Meng shook her head. However, in addition to the principle of time, there is another way to restore you to your original state. What method? Muzian hesitated. Yao Meng stared into Muzian's eyes, a faint smile appeared on the corner of her mouth, and she whispered, the 9th grade elixir required for the evolution of demon cultivators in the demon world, the Tegzu pill. Natural furnace plus natural charm, I'm already looking forward to it. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 409. Tegzu pill. If I remember correctly, this pill seems to be used to make demon cultivators evolve. Why did you mention it all of a sudden? Muzian hesitated. Tegzu pill is a 9th grade pill. There are only a handful of alchemists in the world who can refine 9th grade pills, and there may be only Luo Tan in the world today. And even if he could refine Tegzu pill, Luo Tan would definitely not be able to refine it. After all, a Tegzu pill means that there may be a second demon queen, not to mention that the medicinal materials it needs are also extremely complicated. Muzian spent a lot of effort before, and finally got Luo Tan to agree, promising that when he went to Yizhou to find her in the future, she could refine a Tegzu pill. For this, he sold his body. But now Yao Meng said that he also needed a Tegzu pill? Whether my body can recover, what does it have to do with Tegzu pill? Muzian asked. The chaos body contains several different physiques, and your chaos body is more special, and is related to other girls of heaven, Yao Meng said faintly. In other words, your chaos body contains the physiques of Gong Lianyu and others. In the past, the nine-tailed fox was one of the overlords of the demon world. It can rewrite its own characteristics and confuse everything in the world. Muzian looked thoughtful. He knew a little about what Yao Meng said. Bairuoxi's biological mother was a three-tailed fox. In the past, relying on the bloodline of the three-tailed fox, she played the Gongsun family around, so that Gongsun Xiong once thought that he was having an affair with Bairuoxi's biological mother. In fact, Gong Soon Seong might just hug Zuzi and have fun every night. In the future, if Ruoxi absorbs the Taegzu pill and awakens the body of the nine-tailed fox, then, she will be so charming. But fortunately, I have enough resistance and good concentration. Even if Naxi becomes a nine-tailed fox, I can still suppress it with one hand. Musian thought about this and wanted to ask again about the relationship between his chaos body and Taegzu pill, but combined with what Yao Meng had said before, his expression suddenly stagnated. Then, he subconsciously raised his head and looked at Yao Meng. The latter had a faint smile on his face and looked at him without saying anything. You mean, my chaos body may contain the two major constitutions of Ruoxi? Musian hesitated. Yao Meng smiled, opened her red lips and said, it's not a possibility, but a fact. Musian nodded as if he suddenly understood. After digesting what Yao Meng said, he took several steps back and stared at the fairy with a gentle smile. His expression was extremely complicated, and under his stagnant face, he was full of astonishment and his eyes were full of disbelief. I'm super, I actually have a charming constitution? But my personal interface does not show the physique of the nine-tailed fox. Or is it because Ruoxi has not yet awakened as a nine-tailed fox, so the physique of the nine-tailed fox has not appeared in my personal interface? If things are really as Yao Meng said, then what exactly does it mean? Musian knows better than anyone else. The natural furnace cauldron plus the charming body of the nine-tailed fox is a fatal temptation that is difficult to conceal for any female cultivator in this world, Yao Meng said faintly, but there was a faint smile in her tone that was a bit afraid of chaos in the world. Musian's natural furnace cauldron can still allow the spirit dragon to cast a spell to actively cover it up, so that it will not be exposed in most cases. But if you add the charming body of the nine-tailed fox, if nothing goes wrong, after taking the Taegzu pill, you can awaken the body of the nine-tailed fox, maybe not as charming as by Ruoxi, but you can use the body of the nine-tailed fox to freely transform into different ages. Yao Meng saw that his expression was very subtle, and said again, but of course, it's up to you to decide what you want to do. Musian was in a very subtle mood. I didn't expect that the fox-eared girl I had been thinking about for half a year would become me. Oh no, the body of the nine-tailed fox plus the natural furnace, I will have to worry about being kidnapped when I go out in the future. After a brief struggle, Musian soon let it go. It doesn't matter, anyway, the natural furnace has been born to attract the attention of female cultivators, so what if there is another nine-tailed fox body? Although I don't mind, but the medicinal materials required for the Taegzu pill are too many, I'm afraid they may not be collected in a few years, Musian said helplessly. Taegzu Den requires 13 kinds of precious demon pills, and demon pills can only appear after the immortals on land who are above the peak of the demon world return to the void sit in meditation. In addition, when refining the pill, many rare super precious materials such as thunderstone, half-moon white stone, blood red essence, daybeast ore, and skeletons of void nightmares are also needed. And these materials are just the threshold required for refining Taegzu Den. In addition, 2 emperor-level medicinal materials and many other necessary conditions such as the heaven-grade cauldron furnace must be counted. It can be said that the success of a 9th-grade pill requires the right time, place, and people. I am afraid that only Luo Tan, the medicine emperor of the immortal dynasty in Yuzhou, can refine it. I can find all the medicinal materials for Taegzu Den within 3 months. Although it is troublesome for Luo Tan, I will give her conditions that she can accept, Yao Meng said with a smile. If it is an ordinary 9th-grade pill, Luo Tan may agree. But the Taegzu pill is different. Demon cultivators who take the Taegzu pill, even if they are only small demon cultivators at the essence refining level, can be promoted at an extremely exaggerated speed, and their physical fitness can also reach the extreme. If a demon cultivator with a noble bloodline is given the Taegzu pill, a second existence like the Queen of the Demon Realm may appear. Precisely because the Taegzu pill involves matters in the demon world, even if Yao Meng, who has now ascended to the throne, makes the request in person, the Medicine King may not be able to agree. But there are no absolutes in anything. As long as sufficient conditions are given, no matter who it is, they will seriously consider it. It doesn't matter now whether it's troublesome to refine the Tegzapil. I care more about what you think now than this. Yao Meng stared into Musian's eyes and said, according to your opinion, don't you mind awakening the body of the nine-tailed fox yourself? Musian laughed and said, awakening the body of the nine-tailed fox will be of great benefit to my future practice, right? I am already a natural furnace anyway, it doesn't matter if I have one more natural charm. Although he felt a bit like having too much debt to worry about, Yao Meng was still quite pleased with Musian's answer. His beautiful eyes immediately lit up and he smiled and said, as long as you don't mind. Why do I feel that you are happier than me? Musian glanced at Yao Meng strangely and said doubtfully. Isn't it possible that Yao Meng is a fox-haired girl like me? Or are you happy to see your Taoist monk's charm increase greatly? Isn't she afraid of being cheated on? But think about it, Yao Meng is the Qing emperor, and he also likes other girls from NTR. If the number of Taoists around him increases in the future because of the charm of the nine-tailed fox, it will not be any harm to her. As long as I don't feel like I'm being cheated, then I'm cheating on you. This mentality is simply invincible. Since you agreed to try to awaken Tegzadan, I will prepare the corresponding medicinal materials first, and then take you to Yuzhou together. Yao Meng raised her hand and gently pushed aside the waterfall of black hair, her beautiful green eyes filled with smiles. Wait a minute, you go prepare the medicinal materials now, then I have to bear the firepower of Sister Lingxian and the others alone. Musian suddenly reacted. What happened between him and Yao Meng last night was seen by Lingxuan's sister. If Yao Meng was still in the Lianji sect today, the hatred of Ya Lingxian and others would naturally be attracted by Yao Meng. At this time, he can be on the sidelines and operate appropriately to alleviate the anger of the protagonists. But if Yao Meng leaves, he will have to attract everyone's hatred by himself. Musian thought about this and was about to speak. But at this moment, a slender green figure was seen suspended in the air, her jade feet dancing under her green gauze skirt. She came to Musian and raised her hand to gently place it on his face. I know what you are worried about. I will explain the ins and outs of the matter to the Emperor of Medicine. I had some friendship with her in the past. As long as enough benefits are given, she will not hesitate to refine the Tegzapil. Will refuse. Yao Meng chuckled and said softly, the nine-tailed fox can easily see through the most vulnerable side of others' hearts, and can also see the type of opposite sex that the other person likes most. It can even make its own age go back and forth between the past and the present. Rewrite. This fox clan used to be the overlord in the demon world, but so far, there are less than 3 nine-tailed foxes in the world, and they have all disappeared in the long river of history. Perhaps, you will become the 4th monk to awaken the body of the nine-tailed fox. Has any male demon cultivator from the fox clan cultivated to 9 tails in the past? Musian asked hesitantly. Yao Meng slowly shook his head, it has never happened before. After all, the 9-tailed fox has a special physique that is most suitable for female demon cultivators, so in the fox clan, women have a higher status than men. When will my male cultivator be able to stand up? Musian was trembling with anger. No, that's not what I'm asking. Yao Meng can't leave here now, Musian reacted quickly and was about to say something. But at this time, Yao Meng had already leaned down slightly, like the big sister next door kidnapping the well-behaved boy next door, and whispered softly, the nine-tailed fox charms all living beings. If you can awaken the body of the nine-tailed fox, you will definitely be very good in the future. Strong, only you have become stronger. A charming smile appeared on her holy and beautiful face, and her seductive red lips came close to his ear, only then can I press my sister on the bed unscrupulously. Musian could only feel his heartbeat speeding up uncontrollably. Even though he had been wandering among the flowers for many years, he was whispered to in such a low voice, coupled with the seductive moist eyes, the elastic and full red lips, and the sweet fragrance so close at hand. All of this seemed to be more fragrant than any fine wine in the world. Musian raised his head and stared at those beautiful eyes with a hint of teasing smile. Then in the next moment, Yao Meng gently pressed the back of his head, lowered his head, and kissed his lips with her soft lips. But before Musian could fully feel the aftertaste of the fragrance on his lips, Yao Meng had already gently pushed him away, looking at the young man who seemed to be still unfinished, with a teasing smile on his face. "How are you? Do you feel comfortable?" The child liked it very much and gave it a 5-star rating, but he still wanted to eat more rouge. Musian took a half step forward and wanted to clean off the rouge on Yao Meng's lips. However, this fairy was well versed in the art of inches, so she ducked away with a chuckle and said with a slight smile, "Don't worry, I will go to Yuzhou with you after this. There is plenty of time in the future. As for now." She tapped Musian's forehead gently, and a charming arc appeared at the corner of her lips. "Just sit in meditation and practice in Lianji Peak, and wait for me to come back." The next moment, Yao Meng's figure turned into a shadow. A gust of cold wind came with the rain curtain, and the shadow turned into a wisp of green smoke and disappeared with the wind. I was in a mess, but she ran away. Musian shook his head gently, his expression was subtle. But then, Musian quickly reacted and came to his senses. "No, I should keep Yao Meng. But it's too late to say anything now. Yao Meng has left, and he can't bring her back. Well, when Sister Lingxian and the others are on the way, I think the anger will be almost gone." Musian sighed lightly. "In short, no matter what happens, let's wait until they come." Mr. Mu's ability to adapt to changes is still very strong. One day later, in Lianji Peak, the ground was white and the rain was pouring down, as if the floodgates in the sky were opened, and then the water poured down directly. Thunderous sound accompanied by wind sounded, and the entire Lianji sect seemed to be rendered into a beautiful scene. The formation of Lianji Peak was not open today. Did the sect master know that we had something to visit? Bairuoxi was holding an umbrella, wearing a luxurious white palace skirt with a little plum blossom printed on her chest, adding a bit of softness to the dim rain curtain. The sect master has insight into the secrets of heaven. Maybe she already knew when we entered Lianji section anyway. Let's go in quickly. If nothing unexpected happens, Brother Mu should still be in Yueling Hall now. Ye Lingxian played with the desolate time lock in her hand and said lightly. Today's desolate time lock looks quite active today, and the lock head swings back and forth. The artifact has spirit, and this is the lock of the ancestral artifact. I think it knows that it will have work to do in a while, so the lock of the wild time is so excited at this moment. Lan Feiying's eyes suddenly moved slightly, and she raised her head and looked in a certain direction in Lianji Peak. Ye Qian looked up at the tall and sexy Lan Feiying, wondering, "Sister Feiying, what's wrong? I just felt that someone was looking at us just now, but it seems that it should be my illusion." Lan Feiying gathered her thoughts, and a charming arc appeared at the corner of her mouth. She said, "Let's go to Yueling Hall and wait for him to come back. If I remember correctly, he should be living in the guest room of Yueling Hall. I used to play chess with my sister in the hall, and I am quite familiar with it, so I will lead the way. It's a good opportunity to give that guy a surprise." The raindrops hit the windowsill cracklingly, and the raindrops dripped down along the eaves in a line, as if forming a layer of translucent water film. Musian sat in front of the windowsill, holding his chin, frowning. "AAA." Lin Ling knocked on the table gently, indicating that Musian could make a move. "Sister Lin Ling, can your words and deeds be used to reverse time and rewrite what has happened in the past?" Musian suddenly asked. "AAA." The silver-haired beauty tilted her head and blinked her clear red eyes, her eyes full of confusion. Musian also tilted his head to look at her. "AAA. Lin Ling. It's okay, I just suddenly want to learn from you." Musian waved his hand, then smiled and said, "I was just thinking, if I could go back to 2 days ago, maybe I can still be saved now." The smile suddenly became a little sad. He wanted to see his senior sister last night, but his senior sister refused to see him. After all, the senior sister now is no longer Lan Mulian, but He Mulian. This was also unavoidable. After all, he and Yao Meng were in the bed of the senior sister at that time. In fact, Musian knew that Lan Murian was not really unhappy. After all, with the senior sister's temperament, if she was really angry, she would have stopped him on the night when he and Yao Meng were together, instead of patiently listening to how Qingdi bullied her junior brother all night. The senior sister was angry, more because she thought of the relationship between Musian and Yao Meng. Even though Musian and Yao Meng did not really get married, there were two stand-ins who got married on behalf of the wedding in Shenhuang City at that time. And most people did not know about this. On the one hand, she thought of the special relationship between Qingdi and Musian, and on the other hand, she thought that she and her junior brother were still just senior and junior brothers. I think this is the real reason why Lan Murian was sulking. The senior sister was actually still very homely. Although she was very happy to cheat on others, it was hard to accept the thought that Qingdi secretly cheated on her again and even had a husband and wife relationship with Musian. If she started to make trouble that night, Yao Meng could also say, "This is a private matter between us as husband and wife," which is a critical response. But it's not a big problem. Yao Meng has already gone to prepare the materials needed for the Tegzu pill. He will go to give senior sister a surprise in the evening. I think senior sister will meet him. But senior sister's problem can be solved, but what about Lingxian and even Ruoxi? Sister Lingxuan's desolate time chain is probably ready to move. Musian looked up at the silver-haired beauty who was secretly changing the chess pieces, and said calmly, "Sister Linling, do I have an important position in your heart?" Linling glanced at Musian in confusion, raised her eyes and thought for a while. Eating is one of the most important things in life. Even if Musian doesn't cook, she will ask others to prepare snacks for her. Musian equals eating equals important things. Musian is very important. Linling nodded without hesitation. "A. Answer firmly." "A. Why do you suddenly ask such a strange question?" then asked again in confusion. Musian sighed softly, "If I am locked in the basement by Ruoxi and others one day, remember to save me." "AAA, why?" Linling asked with her head tilted. Then she took out a piece of cardboard and wrote, "You don't seem to want to see them very much." "Of course I want to see them." Musian recalled the blackened state that by Ruoxi and others might appear at this moment, and continued, "But not now, I need some time." Linling said AAA thoughtfully. Musian dropped a black piece, and the chess game on the chessboard has gradually formed an encirclement. He looked at Linling, who was frowning and thinking, and asked, "Do I really have the physique of a three-tailed fox?" Linling glanced at him, then moved closer and sniffed Musian, then wrote on the cardboard, "The smell on you is very complicated, but it does have the breath of a demon cultivator, but I don't know if it is a three-tailed fox." "The smell on me is very complicated." Musian's eyes were a little more puzzled. Linling said AAA, and the words appeared on the cardboard in his hand, "There is a mark left by the Queen of the Demon Realm, a sword mark left by the Lord of the Sword Palace, a petal of the pure world lotus of the Green Emperor is also here, and there is also the water of reincarnation, and the protection left by the original witch. In short, many smells are mixed together, and the taste is great." When Linling said this, a pair of red star eyes stared straight at Musian, and there was a look in his eyes as if he had seen some delicious food. This look is just like the hunter staring at the prey, but to me, Miss Linling is the prey. Musian pointed to the chessboard and smiled, "Sister Linling, it's your turn." Linling took a look and was afraid that she would lose in a few more moves. She raised a small cardboard and wrote, You look very tired, do you want to go back and rest? Musian smiled and said, it's okay, let's finish this game of chess. Linling shook her head, I'm tired, Buletin Xiangguan, I'll take you back. Before Musian spoke again, Linling opened her lips lightly, Musian is not here, but in the guest room of Yueling Palace. At this time, Musian seemed to remember something and immediately said, wait a minute, I have something to ask you. However, it was too late to ask, just as words spoken are like water spilled, and they cannot be taken back. As soon as the words came out, Musian's figure suddenly disappeared in Linling's room. The next moment, Musian felt as if he was lying on a warm bed. She was too anxious. I haven't asked her how her karmic fire is now, whether she needs my help or something like that. Why do I feel that the people in Lianji Peak like to cheat when playing chess? Who did they learn from? Musian complained in his heart. He covered his forehead and felt a little dizzy. It seemed that Musian was teleported to the Moon Spirit Hall in an instant, but in fact, in that short period of less than a few seconds, Musian had already traveled through the void for several seconds. It's really hard to imagine, if Sister Linling said Musian is indestructible, would I still be indestructible even if I am weak? But it shouldn't be that exaggerated, right? Musian teased himself in his heart, shook his head and chuckled, and then slowly opened his eyes. In the house, several beauties were sitting in various places, looking at him with surprised eyes in the flickering candlelight. Then, the luster in his eyes slightly faded. The rain hit the windows, and the water flowed down the window sill. The room was so quiet that there was no sound. After a few seconds of downtime, Musian slowly closed his eyes. Today's bounty result, 1000 plus monthly tickets, 300 blades, currently owed 6 chapters, that is, 12,000 words, I will pay 2k today, and still owe 10,000 words. I also counted the votes cast before the bounty was opened during the day. By the way, Ruoxi's heart lock feels like it should be strengthened. Everyone think about whether there are any interesting abilities, makes a freeloading sound. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 410. The room was quiet, without a sound. Musian took a few seconds to review his life. Well, although this life is wonderful, it is a bit too short. Musian lamented in his heart. Frankly speaking, he expected that Ye Lingxian might not be the only one watching the live broadcast the night before yesterday, and he even expected such a scene. Similarly, he also made corresponding mental preparations after Yao Meng left. However, he did not expect that when Linling sent him back to the guest room with words and words, he would bump into several beauties who were already waiting. Brother Mu, did you have any sequelae after being intimate with Senior Kingdi the night before yesterday? Why did you plan to rest as soon as you came back? From behind, a familiar, cold and pleasant voice came. Ye Lingxian. Knowing that it was not his illusion, Musian had no choice but to open his eyes and look at the women in the guest room. The cold and weak Ruoxi had her hands folded in front of her, her eyes slightly lowered, and she said nothing. The gorgeously dressed Cheongsam beauty Lan Feiying glanced sideways, with a hint of schadenfreude in her eyes. The innocent and pleasant Ye Qian looked as usual, with a bit of concern in his eyes. The maid in the yellow skirt, who never liked to argue, folded her hands on her chest and stood quietly in the corner, frowning and remaining silent. In addition, Musian also saw a very unexpected woman in the house. The future successor of Yaokai Holy Land, Yao Yu. With outsiders here, I can be saved, Musian breathed a sigh of relief. Although it is not clear why Yao Yu is here, Ruoxi is a good girl who knows how to give face to Mu Lang, is gentle, obedient and sensible, so she will not use the concentric lock no matter what at this time. Similarly, Sister Lingxuan's lock of desolate time will naturally not be used now. Sorry, Saint, I have to ask you to be a tool now. Musian stood up, sat in front of the bed, and smiled softly. "Ruoxi, when did you come here? You didn't tell me." I'm thinking of writing down the paper crane and sending it to the Yaokai Holy Land in the next 2 days. After saying that, his eyes fell on the Yaokai saint, and he smiled and said, "Fairy Yaoyu, why are you here too? Is there anything else going on at Yaokai?" The saint of Yaokai smiled and said, "2 days ago, my Taoist heart was a little shaken due to some things. I wanted to ask the saint for advice, but it seems that she is not in Lianji Peak now." Musian glanced at the beauties present calmly, then nodded slightly and changed the subject. "She just left Lianji Peak yesterday to collect the materials needed for the Tegzapil." Tegzapil. As expected, everyone's attention was drawn away. Bairuoxi's eyes flickered slightly and she said softly, "Why did Emperor Qing collect the materials for the Tegzapil? This doesn't quite resemble her character. Is it for another purpose? Or is it really for Sister Ruoxi?" Ye Lingxian asked equally suspiciously. "Ninth grade elixir Tegzudan, this elixir may not be understood by most alchemists. After all, it is a 9th grade elixir, and the prescription alone is already very rare. But it is impossible for Ye Lingxian to be unclear. After all, she is an alchemist. Coupled with Bairuoxi's three-tailed fox physique, it is no wonder that she would suspect that Qing Emperor's motive for searching for the Tegzapil was for Bairuoxi." At this time, Lan Feiying heard Shui Yi's screams from the bottom of her heart, as if she understood something incredible. Lan Feiying subconsciously looked at Musian and whispered, "Qing Emperor went to collect Tegzu. The elixir needed for the elixir is for you, right?" For Mu Lang, Bairuoxi couldn't help but look stunned as she looked at the weak and handsome boy who had a similar temperament to hers sitting in front of the bed. What does Miss Feiying mean by this? Isn't it true that only demon cultivators can take the Tegzapil? Lan Feiying said with a smile, "He has a charming physique similar to Miss Ruoxi's in his body. The Qing Emperor probably took a fancy to this and prepared the materials for refining the Tegzapil. A charming physique similar to mine." Bairuoxi's eyes flickered, and she quickly remembered something. She looked at Musian in disbelief, and almost blurted out, "The physique of the Fox clan." As soon as these words came out, the attention of everyone in the room fell on Musian almost at the same time. "Why are you all so surprised? Since Ruoxi has the body of a three-tailed fox, it is normal for me to have the same physique as her, right?" Musian shrugged and said half-jokingly, "Maybe after I refine the Tegzapil, I can directly awaken as a nine-tailed fox." Ye Lingxuan's beautiful eyes lit up almost instantly, and she looked at Musian with a gleam in her eyes. "Nine-tailed foxes, brother Mu? After taking the Tegzapil, Mu Lang can awaken the body of the nine-tailed fox like me?" Bairuoxi's beautiful eyes also lit up a little, and she subconsciously grasped the hem of her white skirt. "But why does the Holy Lady want to find the materials for the Tegzapil for you?" The Holy Lady of Yaokai suddenly hesitated. Musian said helplessly, "The principle of time contains the law of the Great Road. Even Yao Meng needs time to completely control it. If I don't take the Tegzapil, it will be difficult for me to return to my original state in a short time." As soon as he finished speaking, almost everyone present had a bit of unexpected surprise in their beautiful eyes. In other words, in the 2 months before Qing Emperor returns, Musian will remain as he is now. The protagonists in the room had different thoughts, and Musian finally breathed a sigh of relief when he saw that their attention was successfully attracted. "It's true that I laid the groundwork for so long. They don't seem to be particularly angry about my dual cultivation with Sister Kingbi now. This is true. The person who took the initiative the night before yesterday was not Musian. He was just a monk in the god-refining realm. Could he still resist Yao Meng? At present, the hatred points of the small sharks in the fish pond are attracted by Yao Meng's big shark, which should allow him, the owner of the fish pond, to live in peace for a while. But fortunately, when I looked like Yuzian now, Ruoxi and the others probably couldn't bear to do anything too extreme to me." When he thought of this, Muzian couldn't help but secretly feel happy. For the first time, he found that his body had benefits from going back to the past. If his body returned to its original state now, he would probably have to stay in the small dark room once the Holy Maiden of Yeokai left. Mulang can return his body to its original state after taking the Tegzapil, Byruoxi suddenly asked. Muzian nodded slightly and said with a smile, the body of the nine-tailed fox can freely switch between itself in various time periods. It can even peek into your XP and even your weaknesses, well, weaknesses in every sense of the word. Muzian did not say this, and would give them a small surprise after they actually took the Tegzapil in the future. My father has collected a lot of various special spiritual stones in the Tianxian Palace as a collection. I can get them for Brother Mu later, Ye Lingxian suddenly said. Byruoxi's beautiful eyes flashed slightly and she said softly, there are still some medicinal materials needed to refine Tegzudan in the Sword Palace. I'll go there sometime. As expected, everyone is a good girl who cares about Mu Lang. Mu Jian felt quite pleased and said touchedly, thank you. The Saint of Yeokai looked at this harmonious scene and couldn't help but raise her brows slightly, feeling that something was not quite right. It stands to reason that when they were in Yeokai before, a few people wanted to look like they wanted to blacken Muzian by training him in the basement, but now the atmosphere seems to be quite harmonious. At this time, someone behind her suddenly gently tugged at the corner of her clothes. The Holy Maiden of Yeokai glanced sideways. The maid, who was wearing a yellow skirt and had a cold temperament, gestured to her with her eyes, and then met Lan Feiying again. Chuanyan said something. The Holy Maiden of Yeokai understood and quietly left the room with the two of them. Muzian obviously noticed the change in the atmosphere in the room and immediately shouted. Sister Mengru, where are you going? Although the maid is usually unknown and unnoticed, and even lowers her own sense of existence, Muzian has been paying attention to Wei Mengru from the beginning. Wei Mengru glanced at her young master, gave him a cold look that said, I hope you will be blessed, and then closed the door behind her. Wow! The lock of desolate time spread across the sky like a giant net in mid-air, and the golden light almost enveloped the entire room. Mu Jian was trembling inwardly. He looked at his pretty and lovely sister and smiled like an elder brother, Sister Lingxian, what is this? At the same time, I shouted in my heart, Sister Ye, is Sister Ye here? However, the beautiful ancestor of the Ye family did not respond at all. If Muzian could see the situation in his natural furnace, he would see a beautiful ancestor in a black and red dress sitting in the void at this moment, with a beautiful face like a fairy in a painting, so beautiful that it is breathtaking. She lowered her eyes slightly, swaying her jade feet under her skirt, with a hint of helplessness between her brows and eyes. If the only person who threatened Muzian's safety today was the master of the Sword Palace, she would have stopped him. But now, the Ye family sisters are also here, so there's nothing we can do. Originally, the relationship between Ye Qingxin and Muzian was carried out behind the backs of the Ye family sisters. If I help Muzian now, where will I be able to save the face of the ancestor of the Ye family? Could it be that he has become someone who competes with the descendants of his Ye family for the cake? Ye Qingxin rubbed the center of her eyebrows, with a hint of apology in her coquettish red eyes, and whispered to herself, although I also want to help you, since the person who took action is my descendant, there is no other way. Seeing that Ye Qingxin inside his body was completely motionless, Muzian suddenly raised his head and looked at the golden chains in the sky, and fell into deep thought for a long time. After a while, I chose to give up thinking. He was still careless. The previous topic transfer went smoothly, and everyone really felt sorry for Mr. Mu and would not lock him in a dark room. However, this does not mean that they will refuse to refining Muzian now. As for Ye Qingxin, it's not that she didn't hear the cry, it's just that the person who took action at this moment, Ye Lingxian, and Qianer who was watching on the side, as the ancestor of the Ye family, naturally couldn't help. But it's not a big problem. Lingxian is Brother Mu's good sister after all, so she won't go too far. Muxian looked up at the room that seemed to be wrapped in the lock of desolate time, maintained his composure, and showed a gentle smile. What is Sister Lingxian planning to do? The lock of desolate time has locked Brother Mu, and I can also see what is happening around Brother Mu, so I think, Brother Mu should know what I plan to do. Ya Lingxian said quietly, wearing a complicated and gorgeous dress that made her look even more attractive. Quiet and elegant. This ancestral weapon lock can change the time in this room. The day Brother Mu spent in this room may only be an hour in the outside world. Also, at this time, Brother Mu should call Lingxian his sister. Ya Lingxian looked at the weak and lovely Bai Ruoxi and asked inquiringly, right, Sister Ruoxi? Bai Ruoxi silently took out the concentric lock from between her plump breasts, and looked at Muxian tenderly. Sister Lingxian is right, so Mu Lang should also call me sister. At the end of the story, when she looked at the big boy in front of the bed, she imagined the scene of Qing Emperor and Mu Lang having sex the night before, and then she couldn't help but replace the role of Qing Emperor with herself. Bai Ruoxi's body seemed to be slightly hot when she thought of certain scenes. She rubbed her legs from time to time. There was a seductive blush on her delicate face. Her peach blossom eyes were originally gentle. After being covered with a layer of mist, her charming eyes were like silk, extremely seductive. The next moment, the concentric lock flew towards Muxian. At the same time, in the Moon Spirit Hall, Shuiyi, the fourth pillar god of the southern wilderness, was communicating with Lan Feiying from the bottom of her heart. Is it okay to just leave him there? His physique is so special, aren't you going to fight for it? Shuiyi couldn't help but ask, feeling extremely regretful in her heart. The natural furnace cauldron is also a natural furnace cauldron that can evolve. If she can practice with it, she can also regain some of her peak strength. And by that time, the success rate of devouring the holy maiden of the southern wilderness will be increased a bit. If you practice dual cultivation with him, you will be able to refine your spirit and return to your emptiness as soon as possible. Shuiyi followed the instructions with a somewhat bewitching tone. However, Lan Feiying's expression remained calm. Don't worry, I have something else to ask my sister later. I will take my time after asking my sister about that guy. She licked her lips and smiled, sexy and charming. He won't run away anyway. Shuiyi fell into a brief silence, her beautiful eyes twinkling slightly. Through this period of getting along with Lan Feiying, she already knew that Lan Feiying was too uncontrollable. If Yayu was the original one, he might have become a licking dog willing to surrender under her pomegranate skirt. However, Lan Feiying could not be controlled by her. I have to think of a way. Outside Daoka Palace in Yuzhou, a 9-headed dragon bird pulled a green and white phoenix chariot and galloped towards the palace. Yao Meng, who is wearing a green gauze skirt, is sitting in it. Her beauty is moving, her hair is simply pulled up with a bun, but it gives people a beauty that seems to be out of this world. In the depths of Daoka Palace, a woman in a white dress was sitting in front of the throne. She looked at the beauty in a green dress who came out of the phoenix chariot with a smile on her face and said with a smile, "The Qing Emperor has not yet had time to ascend to heaven. I wish to congratulate you, but I didn't expect Qing Emperor to come here first." Yao Meng, led by the maid on the side, walked on the luxurious red carpet and took a seat in front of a bench not far away. He smiled slightly and said, "I haven't had time to thank Yao Huang for his help on the day he ascended. How can I bother you now? Come to say thank you in person." Luo Tan shook his head and said, "In the final analysis, I didn't do anything, I just waited and watched." Yao Meng chuckled and said, "For me at that time, what I needed most was to wait and see. If Yuzhou and the demon realm had also taken action to prevent her from ascending to the realm of immortality at that time, I am afraid that she might not be able to enter the realm of immortality now. In that special situation at that time, being able to choose to wait and see what happened was already a huge help. After all, for these Hedeo powerful men in Kyushu, letting a certain powerful man from Dongzhou ascend to heaven is a great threat to them. No one can guarantee whether there will be any after the Qing Emperor rises to heaven. What ambitions, even annexing other forces. After the two powerful men chatted for a while, Luo Tan suddenly asked, I wonder why Emperor Qing came here today despite his busy schedule. You have only been married to little friend Musian for a few days. Do you think you want to separate from him so soon? When Luo Tan said the last word, there was a hint of ridicule in his tone. The slender green jade fingers gently stroked the letter in his hand, with a playful look in his eyes. This letter was sent to Yekingzin by Musian not long ago. If it weren't for the conditions in this letter that she couldn't refuse, she might not have been able to watch the Qing Emperor emerge and ascend. I just don't know what Musian has done for Qingdi. Does she know? The Medicine King is really smart. Yao Meng's beautiful eyes flashed with a faint smile. To be honest, I came here today to ask the Medicine King to refine a pill for me. Oh. Luo Tan's eyes became more interested, and he raised his hand to reject the palace maid, staring at the fairy, and said, if Qing Emperor can come and open this mouth in person, I think not many people can refine this elixir. I don't know. What kind of elixir is it? Taigzapil. Yao Meng smiled. There was a brief silence in the hall. Luo Tan's smile faded slightly, frowned slightly, and said, Qing Emperor should know that alchemists have their own bottom lines, and one of my bottom lines is that I will not easily refine 9th-grade elixirs, let alone contribute to the most powerful Taigzapil in the demon world. Yao Huang, please listen to what I have to say first. Yao Meng smiled lightly. I want to ask you to refine the Taigzapil. In fact, it has nothing to do with the demon world, just for my Taoist companion. Your Taoist companion? Luo Tan narrowed his eyes. Under the luxurious white dress, a pair of beautiful black stocking legs sat crossed, and he looked sideways. What does this matter have to do with him? If you want the Medicine King to refine the elixir, you must be sincere, and Yao Meng naturally knows this in his heart. She roughly explained what had happened before, and how the principle of time made Musian's body go backwards. Luo Tan's eyes flickered slightly, and she moved her jade neck, as if she wanted to ask more questions, but she held back. She kept her tone calm and said, in other words, Musian's current appearance has become the boy he was in the past. For some reason, when she recalled the handsome look of that boy in her mind, and thought of his appearance when time went backwards, her heart couldn't help but beat wildly a few times. Soon, Luo Tan came back to his senses, cleared his throat, and said, this matter is of great importance, and it takes at least 9 days to refine the Taigzapil. Although I am willing to believe what the Green Emperor said, I still have some doubts. After all, it is incredible that an East Continent cultivator has the body of a demon cultivator in the demon world. So dash. Luo Tan changed her black silk beautiful legs and raised them, her snow-white boots swaying gently, staring at Yao Meng, and said faintly, I want to meet him privately and confirm his situation. If the Green Emperor really cares about him, I think this can still be done, right? Warm Ti. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 411. The 9-headed dragon bird floated outside the palace, and the phoenix chariot emitting milky white light looked quite sacred and charming. Inside the palace, at this moment, the two great powers were talking to each other. After hearing Luo Tan's words, Yao Meng calmly picked up the teacup and took a sip, raised her holy and clear green eyes, and said calmly, I don't know why the Medicine Emperor wants to see him. The Green Emperor said that your time theory has not been mastered yet, so the time on him has also changed and turned into what it used to be, so it's not strange that I want to see him to confirm this matter. Luo Tan looked at the woman sitting in front of the bench, her elegant fingertips teasing a strand of hair, with a faint smile in her beautiful eyes. First, after meeting him, we can confirm whether he really has the body of a three-tailed fox. Second, we can confirm what the Green Emperor said. In addition, his cooperation will be needed when refining the Tegzapil. If the Green Emperor agrees, I can provide some of the materials needed for the Tegzapil. You only need to prepare 13 demon pills. The remaining medicinal materials, I can prepare them in advance. Yao Meng raised her eyebrows slightly, a little surprised. The materials needed for the Tegzapil are in short supply. The Medicine Emperor is really willing to give them. I just don't know if there are any conditions for your help. There is no free lunch in the world. Although Yuzhou is an immortal dynasty with a deep foundation and proficient in alchemy, it is reasonable that even Luo Tan cannot easily collect all the materials for the Tegzapil, not to mention that she took the initiative to propose the word gift. The materials needed for the Tegzapil cannot be measured by spirit stones. No conditions. Luo Tan shook his head gently, with a faint smile in his eyes. I haven't congratulated the Green Emperor on his ascension a few days ago. If young friend Mu is really a fox from the demon world, the ingredients of the Tegzapil will be a gift to the Green Emperor on his ascension. By the way, I also wish the Green Emperor a happy wedding. Yao Meng glanced at the woman in a luxurious white dress calmly, and after a while, she smiled and said, after collecting the demon pills, I will take him to visit Yuzhou together. Luo Tan smiled back, and after watching the ferry turn into a ray of green light and return to the Phoenix chariot, he quietly withdrew his sight. Narcissus, there is no need to hide behind the hall. The Green Emperor knew you were there a long time ago, but he never said anything to expose it. She glanced at the back of the hall inadvertently, her tone flat. At the back of the hall, a woman with an oval face in a grey robe walked with graceful steps. Her eyebrows and eyes were like paintings, her skin was like cream, and her eyes were bright. Even though she was wearing plain clothes, she still couldn't hide her stunning figure under the grey robe. Xiao Shuixian looked up at the woman leaning against the throne and hesitated. Your Majesty, will the Green Emperor really bring Muzian? Since Xiao Hua died last time, Xiao Shuixian has been favored by Luo Tan. In addition to practicing in the academy every day, she goes to the Immortal Dynasty to watch Luo Tan's alchemy. Because of this, the disciples in the academy are all envious. Even though Xiao Shuixian is very popular in the academy, being chosen by Luo Tan is also enviable. After all, this Hideo of Yuzhou is the top alchemist in Zhuzhou. Being able to watch the alchemy by her side will be of great benefit to practice and even alchemy in the future. If the Green Emperor didn't lie, he would definitely bring Muzian here. Luo Tan said confidently, there may be more than one person in the world who can refine the Tegzapil, but I must be the only one who is willing to refine the Tegzapil. Xiao Shuixian looked thoughtful. At this time, Luo Tan suddenly said, by the way, you go and tell Jingzi to prepare all the medicinal materials needed for the Tegzapil within a month. Xiao Shuixian nodded first, and then finally couldn't help asking, why does your Majesty help him so much? Just because you owe him a favor. I'm just a little interested in fox ears. Luo Tan looked at the grey-robed girl meaningfully, and replied quietly, yes. After being lonely for tens of thousands of years, he finally met a natural furnace with the same physique as himself, and he could even continue to evolve. Even his appearance is top-notch, not to mention that he has become the weak and handsome appearance of the past. If he gave up this time, he might not be able to wait until the next time. She believed that the Green Emperor's vision would not be wrong. Does your Majesty really intend to let Muzian live in Daoka Palace for a while? Xiao Shuixian asked again. Of course. Luo Tan raised his eyebrows slightly and said lightly, I owe him a favor, and I will definitely repay it this time. Xiao Shuixian opened her red lips slightly, as if she wanted to say something. But Luo Tan seemed to know what she wanted to say, and chuckled, you don't have to worry about his safety. During this time, I will take good care of him on behalf of Emperor Cheng. She licked her lips gently, but a playful smile danced in her majestic eyes. In every sense, I will take good care of him. The rain was pouring down, and the rain fell on the ground with a crackling sound, and the ground was hazy with white mist. Fortunately, I am still a good child who knows nothing about the world. Otherwise, before Yao Meng comes back, I would have to stay in the basement with Ruoxi and the others all day long. An hour later, Musian held his waist with one hand and the wall with the other, and walked out of the guest room with weak breath and unsteady steps. He looked at the green mist outside and cried with joy. For the first time, he discovered that his current state still had many benefits. First of all, his realm had not been affected in any way, and he was still at the 6th level of the God Refiner. Secondly, Bai Ruoxi and Sister Lingxian treated him very gently. I think it's because when I saw Yongxian at this stage, she couldn't bear to do anything too extreme, and she was inevitably overflowing with maternal love. I'm sorry, but Lingxian is in the restricted area, and Qianer is a descendant of my Ye family. It's really inconvenient for me to help you. At this time, Ye Qingxin's somewhat helpless voice came from the bottom of her heart. Musian shook his head and understood, this is not to blame Sister Ye. After all, you are the only surviving ancestor of the Ye family. If Qianer knows what happened between you and me, it may have a big impact on her stimulate. As long as you understand, I will find a way to compensate you after this. A cold and soft voice responded. Ye Qingxin, who was wearing a red dress, leaned in the void. After hearing Musian's answer, she felt even more guilty. The sisters of the Ye family were extremely respectful to her and regarded her as their respected ancestor. However, the two sisters did not know that the ancestor they respected had a rather ambiguous relationship with their brother Mu, and even intimacy other than double cultivation was not allowed. I did a lot. Sister Ye won't want to leave me until now, right? In fact, even if I tell Qianer and Lingxian the truth, they won't say anything. Musian looked at the rain curtain outside the guest room and communicated with Ye Qingxin in his heart. Even now, it's impossible for me to leave you. Ye Qingxin shook her head slightly and said, however, the matters between you and me should be kept secret for the time being. After this, I will find a suitable time to make it clear to them. If she only fell in love with Emperor Qing, she would still be quite happy, but when she thought that this child was the sweetheart of the descendants of her Ye family, Ye Qingxin felt a little complicated. After all, competing for the cake with his own descendants, I feel a bit sorry no matter what. Musian nodded slightly and said, Sister Ye has the final say. A ray of red light flew out of Musian's body, transforming into a beautiful woman wearing a black and red dress with a charming temperament. Her long curly hair was spread down her back. Looking at Musian's weak state, she couldn't help but laugh, those children are really warm to you. An hour in the lock of desolation is equivalent to a day outside, even though Ye Lingxian is a reserved and elegant girl, there are times when she is angry. At this time, the girl will probably do something that is not in line with the etiquette of a young lady, after all, no one will see it anyway. Musian heard the ridicule in Ye Qingxin's words and waved his hand helplessly, Sister Ye, stop laughing at me. Why did you leave my natural furnace? Where are you planning to go? This beautiful ancestor of the Ye family looked as stunningly beautiful as she did in the past, looking at the flowers by the water. At this moment, a faint smile appeared on her delicate and pretty face, and she said, the girl in the restricted area has touched the threshold of returning to void. I think she will hit the bottleneck soon. While she is still there these days, here, I'll go talk to her first. After refining the spirit and returning to the void, a new Taoyuan will be involved. If you don't think about the path you want to take in the future, you can easily end up in a dead end. In the past, many geniuses in Kyushu were stuck at this step for life, with no hope of refining their gods and returning to the void. Musian said thoughtfully, and did not forget to remind, Sister Lingxian is mentally and physically exhausted. She should still be meditating now. Sister Ye may have to wait for her. Ye Qingxin gave him an angry look and said calmly, who should she blame for being so tired? Musian spread his hands. Sister Ye, does it feel better to look at me? This wave belonged to the same death as Sister Lingxian and the others, but they received a surge of spiritual energy, while Musian received nothing. Instead, they lost their spiritual energy and physical strength. Do you understand my pain? Oh, no. Mr. Mu gained happiness. Although my body is a little weak now. It was difficult to control Ruoxi's heart in the past, but now it is even harder to control it. If it weren't for the help of sisters Lingxian and Qian'er, Musian would have been hard-pressed to suppress Naoxi alone. You feel bad, don't you deserve it? Ye Qingxin's charming eyes were as silky as silk, and she gave him a look of disgust, which seemed to be alluring. Musian said aggrievedly, Sister Ye has always been in my body. She should know that once the lock of desolate time comes out, I will have no choice at all, right? Ye Qingxin looked at him playfully, if you use the measuring ruler, the lock of desolate time will not be able to control you, at least you will be able to break free in a short period of time. That weapon was used by the Lord of Heaven in the past, not to mention that the previously lost divinity was returned to the heavenly ruler after Musian used the essence and blood from the immortal realm. That measuring ruler can measure everything in the world. If it is sacrificed, the barrier spread by the lock of desolate time will be destroyed immediately. Musian shook his head gently, there is no great need to sacrifice the measuring ruler. If it can make Sister Lingxian happy, then it doesn't matter. These words make even me a little jealous. Ye Qingxin blinked her jade-like red eyes, looked at the big boy in front of her teasingly, and smiled sweetly, so in the final analysis, you are just giving them a way to vent their anger. Even if there is no lock of desolate time, you will still be controlled by them in other ways. Musian put his index finger in front of his lips, and a faint smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. Sister Ye, some things are better to know by yourself, there is no need to say them out loud. If Sister Ye is dissatisfied with Yao Meng, I will also try every means to make you happy. After all, in the heavenly palace, you are the first big sister I fell in love with. This is the charm of language. As long as enough modifiers are added, there can be many firsts. For example, you are the first woman I like in Dongzhou, you are the first woman I love most in Tianqian City. Then, Musian took Ye Qingxin into his arms with just the right amount of tenderness. Although her body was a little frail, the warm breath of the boy and the small hands around her waist made Ye Qingxin's delicate body tremble, and the big sister-like playful smile on her face also froze a little. Although it was not the first time to be so intimate with Musian, it was the first time to be intimate with Musian at this time. Moreover, it was the first time for the other party to say such gentle words. She always liked to tease others, but at this moment, Ye Qingxin's heart suddenly became a little confused. But soon, she reacted and gently pushed Musian away. Aren't you afraid of being seen by others when you are intimate with others in such a place? Her black hair was soft and loose, and her tone was like a reprimand, but her eyes were full of seductive charm. I just hope that Sister Ye can understand my feelings. If others notice it, I will accept it. Musian smiled casually. Ye Qingxin pursed her rosy lips, and her red eyes, as clear as glass, stared at Musian, with a little joy in her eyes. Although she knew that Musian might just be making people happy, she was still a little moved. In the past until now, she has had many suitors, but she has never had close contact with any opposite sex, but chose to practice Taoism with one heart. Originally, she was just simply trading with Musian, but after spending some time with him, she liked him a little more. It would be nice if you weren't the brother that those two kids liked. Ye Qingxin suddenly sighed. Musian was startled, then smiled, and said, although Sister Ye cares about the Ye family, I'm afraid I know more about Lingxian and Qian'er. If I tell them clearly, I don't think they will mind. No. Ye Qingxin suddenly denied Musian's words. Musian was stunned for a moment. No. Ye Qingxin did not answer. She put her hands on her knees, and her long dress of black and red fell to the ground. Then, she bent slightly and half knelt in front of Musian, her nose tip seemed to touch Musian's nose, and her seductive little mouth seemed to touch Musian's lips, accompanied by the sweet fragrance gently exhaled, and the seductive moist voice lingered in her ears. If you were not their beloved brother Mu, you would not be trapped by the chain of desolate time today. The courtyard is near the Moon Spirit Hall. In a pavilion beside the courtyard, two beauties, one in red and one in white, with completely opposite temperaments, are playing chess. Windproof curtains hang down from the four corners of the pavilion. In the pavilion, a smokeless charcoal fire burns brightly, dispelling the cold. Lan Feiying sits opposite the indifferent little white dress with her hands on her cheeks, enjoying her sister's unhappy expression while playing chess with her. "What's wrong with you today, sister? I rarely see you look so sad," Lan Feiying suddenly asked with a smile. Lan Murian glanced at her charming sister and said calmly, "I'm wearing a veil, can you tell what my expression is?" Lan Feiying smiled charmingly, "Sister, I've watched you grow up since you were a child. I know what you're thinking from your every move and every look. It should be me who watched you grow up." Lan Murian had to correct her, "I'm the elder sister." Het. Lan Feiying smiled brightly, "That being said, in fact, we didn't spend much time together. After all, my sister left the Lan family a long time ago, and the memories of our time together are now gone. It's blurred." Her voice suddenly stagnated, and her smile also withdrew a little. She changed the subject without leaving a trace. "Sister is so upset, is it because of Musian? Has he upset sister in Lianji Peak these days?" Knock knock knock. The cold senior sister with a chest that can be placed on the table frowned slightly, tapped the table with her green jade fingers, and said calmly, "I don't have much communication with him. It's not because of his affairs, but I encountered some problems in cultivation." Before Lan Murian finished speaking, she noticed the charming and enchanting sister's half-smile eyes. Lan Murian pretended to be indifferent, with a smile on her cold face. "Don't you believe what I said?" "I believe it, of course I believe it, I believe everything my sister says." Lan Feiying sat with her plump and slender legs crossed under her cheongsam, and her snow-white skin looked particularly dazzling under the dim sky. "There's no referee for our game, why don't I call him to accompany us?" she suddenly said with a smile. Seeing Ye Qingzhen leave gracefully, Musian subconsciously stroked his lips, and then looked at the figure that had gradually disappeared from his sight, and couldn't help but sighed. Sure enough, the elder sister is really a wonderful creature. Especially the eldest sister who cultivates immortality. We must find a suitable time in the future to suppress this flirtatious woman. Musian took out a few essence-returning pills from Naja and poured them all into his mouth like beans. Then, his eyes searched around, looking for the maid. It wouldn't matter if it was Sister Mengru who had not established a relationship with him before, but it was different now. Although Sister Mengru has always been a good maid who cares about her master, she will not be angry even if she sees her master being intimate with other girls. She also shows the aura and tolerance of a main palace. But there is probably a limit to how much people can tolerate. If he is not comforted properly, Mr. Mu will probably go into the dark room when he can't bear it any longer. The identity of the original witch is extremely mysterious, and even Musian's personal interface was given to her by her in the past. If not handled properly, Musian may have to meet Yeyu again in the underworld. Oh, Sister Mengru is kind-hearted, so she shouldn't go too far. Taking advantage of the special constitution of his natural spiritual body, Musian opened his spiritual consciousness and scanned around the outside of the house, but did not find Wei Mengru. Where has Sister Mengru gone? Musian's eyes flashed slightly, and he was about to use his sword to look for the maid in Lianji Peak. At this time, a sexy sound of high heels walking on the ground suddenly came from the distance. Musian turned his head subconsciously and looked around. A tall and graceful beauty in a fiery red cheongsam was standing in the rain curtain holding an umbrella. She said with a smile, "Are you done with your busy work? I want to see you or be alone with you. It's not easy for you to talk." Sister Fei Ying. It stands to reason that Sister Fei Ying should also have seen the scene of me being intimate with her sister, but she didn't seem angry. Musian hesitated and said, "What's the matter with you? Could it be that you also have some kind of ancestral weapon like a lock?" Lan Feiying glanced at him, "Can't I come to you if nothing happens?" She walked up to Musian, looked down at the big boy in front of her, and said with a smile, "My sister wants to meet you. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment." So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 412. Senior sister is finally willing to see me? Musian's first reaction to hearing this was surprise. According to his expectation, senior sister would have to wait at least a few days, and she would be able to see her after she calmed down. However, it has only been a day. Could it be that she has tasted the sweetness? But it is true. For girls, there is only a difference between once and countless times. After the first time, it will be easier to deal with it afterwards. But why is it Sister Fei Ying who came to call me? Could it be that Sister Fei Ying is planning to come together? Musian said in his heart, looking at the beauty in the red cheongsam who was walking in front of him with an umbrella, and immediately stepped forward to follow her. "Sister Fei Ying, do you know what senior sister wants me to do?" Lan Fei Ying glanced at the young man behind her and said with a smile, "How can I know? You know my sister's character. Even if she has something on her mind, she won't show it." "That's right. Senior sister rarely expresses her thoughts directly." After hearing Lan Fei Ying's answer, Musian stopped asking and followed her quietly. Listening to the sound of the pattering rain, there seemed to be an atmosphere of silence between the two. "Sister Fei Ying, don't you have anything to say?" Musian suddenly asked. Lan Fei Ying glanced at him with a smile. "What? Do you want me to comment on my feelings after you and Kingdi were intimate? I just care a little. Doesn't Sister Fei Ying care about these things?" Musian looked at this beautiful woman in a fiery red cheongsam. He knew that this woman was very smart and it was impossible for her not to know what he wanted to say. It would be a lie to say I don't care, but I know your character. Lan Fei Ying paused and glanced at him from the side. She put on some makeup on her face, which made her look even more beautiful. It sounded like she was saying, "I know you are a scumbag, and I've gotten used to it." Musian followed her with an unchanged expression. After a moment of silence, he said worriedly, "The heavenly Dao chose you as the chosen son, but now you and I are walking together. What if the heavenly Dao knew about it?" The heavenly Dao is just a collection of the spiritual consciousness of the 9 provinces cultivators. It is used to correct and balance the existence of the 9 provinces. It is also affected by the rules of heaven and earth it has made, and cannot directly interfere with the 9 provinces. Lan Fei Ying narrowed her eyes and smiled, "So you can rest assured. If the heavenly Dao cannot rely on me to clean up those who violate the rules of heaven and earth, then it will probably choose a new chosen son. In other words, there are more than 1 or 2 chosen sons like Yayu and Xiaohua. Before achieving the goal, the heavenly Dao will once again give the new chosen son great luck. In other words, I still have new leeks to eat." Musian's eyes lit up, and he was a little excited. At this time, Lan Fei Ying stopped and looked up at the pavilion in front of her. The cold wind blew with raindrops, and the curtains under the pavilion fluttered in the wind, and the beauty in white skirt under the pavilion could be vaguely seen. Lan Fei Ying raised her red lips slightly, and a sexy arc was drawn, saying, "But when did you have the illusion that I would not deal with you?" Musian was stunned, and before he could react, the Cheongsam beauty had already reached out and held Musian's hand, then raised her head and smiled, "Sister, I brought him here." Musian's eyelids twitched wildly, and she had reacted, but before she could withdraw her hand, the cold beauty in the moon-white long skirt under the pavilion had already looked at her sideways. She was stunned at first, and then a faint smile flashed across her beautiful eyes as clear as a cold pond. "The ground is slippery in the rain, are you afraid that he will fall?" The case was solved. Sister Fei Ying did not deliberately provoke senior sister, but was worried that I would fall. The story behind it is really heartwarming. Musian complained madly in his heart, and walked into the pavilion with Lan Fei Ying. Were they playing chess just now? Musian looked at the chessboard on the table, and glanced at the graceful and elegant Lan Mulian calmly. Her fair face was calm and indifferent. She noticed Musian's eyes, and her beautiful eyes turned sideways, and she said coldly, "Can we continue playing chess now?" On the surface, it seemed to be directed at Lan Fei Ying, but in fact, the cold eyes stayed on Musian from beginning to end. "Of course, let's continue playing chess." Lan Fei Ying glanced at Musian with a smile, and continued, "I asked you to come here just to let you be a referee to see who won the game between me and my sister." Does a game need a referee? Musian was speechless for a moment. But he still sat aside patiently and watched the two sisters play chess. For him, being a referee didn't have any effect. Thinking about it carefully, it was quite pleasant to watch a pair of sisters playing chess in a pavilion in the rain. Time passed silently. Musian not only knew tea art, but also chess art, so watching the two sisters playing chess was not too boring. After all, no one really came to watch chess, right? At least what he appreciated at the moment was not the chess game, but the two sisters playing chess. At this moment, the plump figures of the two sisters were hidden under the clothes, and their full and upright breasts supported the clothes, looming. They were both at the most attractive age for women, with bright eyes like stars, beautiful eyebrows like black and delicate and beautiful facial features. Most importantly, the two looked almost exactly the same. In the past, Lan Murian was wearing a veil, so it was not clear to see her clearly, but now she was not wearing a veil, so one could see her face that was almost similar to Lan Fei Ying. Musian felt that if the twin sisters changed into a set of clothes and imitated each other's daily personality, he might not be able to recognize them. However, one of the sisters was cold as ice, while the other was charming and enchanting. Both of them were as mature as peaches, and no matter which one was taken out alone, they were all great beauties. Musian quickly and quietly withdrew his gaze. If there was only one of the sisters, he could tease them unscrupulously, but when both of them were together, it was not very convenient. "Well, actually, I really have no interest in the twin sisters. I just simply appreciate their looks," Musian murmured in his heart, maintaining a well-behaved demeanor, sitting aside to enjoy the game between the two sisters. Senior sister lost. After about a quarter of an hour, Musian took a look at the chessboard and understood it in his heart. In the next few moves, the two sisters will decide the winner. However, just when Musian thought of this, he found that Lan Fei Ying did not place the chess piece in the position he expected, but instead placed a chess piece in an insignificant position in the chessboard. Musian was stunned and could not help but look at Lan Fei Ying's sexy and charming figure a few more times. Sister Fei Ying didn't realize that she had won, or was she deliberately letting senior sister win? Now the winner is senior sister. This thought just flashed through Musian's mind, but the next moment, what surprised Musian was that senior sister also placed a black piece in an insignificant position in the corner like Lan Fei Ying. The speed of the two sisters' moves became faster and faster, and the more Musian watched, the more he felt something was wrong. They had no rules in their moves, and it was obvious that they were playing blindly. Why do I have to be a referee? Isn't this just two chickens pecking at each other? Of course, although he thought about it, Musian did not show it. He admired the playing posture of the two top sisters, and his eyes stayed on their chests for a moment, making a slight comparison. It seems that there is really no difference between them. If you have to say, Sister Fei Ying has a beauty mole under her right eyebrow, while senior sister's is on the left. As for the rest, whether it is the plump and white long legs or the appearance, there is not much difference. While admiring the game between the two beauties, as time passed, Musian gradually felt that something was wrong. Something was wrong, they didn't seem to intend to decide the winner, and the position of the chess piece did not affect the game at all. What on earth were they trying to do? Why did the two noobs have to decide the winner and ask me to be the referee? At this moment, the thoughts in Musian's mind flashed quickly. Think about it carefully, why did Sister Fei Ying bring me here? Is it just to let me be the referee? Suddenly, a blue lightning flashed through Musian's brain, and his eyes widened a little. No, they asked me to be the referee, not to let me be the referee of this game, but to. Musian's eyelids twitched slightly, and he immediately stood up, just about to find an excuse to slip away. But at this moment, as Lan Murian's last chess piece fell, she looked at the chess game on the table indifferently, and said faintly, "It seems that this game should be a draw, right?" "Not necessarily." Lan Murian's cold voice came from the pavilion. She raised her autumn water eyes and looked at the boy who just stood up with a smile. "Junior brother, who do you think won between me and your sister Fei Ying?" Musian's scalp tingled. "Draw, this is not uncommon in black and white chess, but it definitely doesn't happen too often. This is not asking him to be the referee, this is asking who do you want to stand on the side of the two of us. Don't you have the best relationship as sisters? Good sisters should share a quilt, just like Qianer and Ling Xian. Why do we have to decide who wins and who loses?" Musian glanced at the chessboard calmly and coughed, "A draw is a tie, so there is naturally no winner or loser." "How can there be a winner or loser? A draw is considered a draw only when both parties agree after negotiation. In other words, before the negotiation is successful, the game is not considered a win or a loss," Lan Fei Ying said with a smile. "My sister and I don't mind letting y'all judge the outcome of this game, right, sister?" Lan Fei Ying looked up at the beautiful woman in a white dress sitting opposite her, with a cool temperament, and asked with a smile. Lan Murian hummed, and her beautiful eyes also looked at the young man in a white robe inlaid with gold and silver threads with a slight smile. Usually, she always disliked fighting with others, but now when facing her own sister, Lan Murian showed a strong desire to win or lose. From the beginning, the focus was not on the game of chess, but on the players and the attitude of the people watching the game. At this moment, no matter who stands on the side, the other side will definitely be dissatisfied. "Why don't you just fight here?" Musian complained madly in his heart. He thought for a while and said tentatively, "It is difficult to tell the winner from the result of this game. So you might as well try to cooperate and win together." Lan Fei Ying glanced at him charmingly, "Get lost. There is still a concept of cooperation and win-win in chess. Junior brother, do you think I am a fool?" Lan Murian also looked unkind. "This guy is really hateful. The night before yesterday, Kingdi came to see him. After all, they are nominally married to Kingdi. There is nothing to say about their love, but now he has the nerve to say win-win cooperation. What a shameless guy. And he looks so weak and cute, it's really hateful. So you said it was just a game of chess and I just picked one, but in fact, you really want me to choose one of the two. But I am a mature adult, I don't want to choose one of the two. No matter who is missing from Sister Fei Ying and Senior Sister, it will be incomplete." Musian sighed in his heart and was about to speak. At this time, a gentle song of AAA suddenly came from the back mountain of Lianji Peak. The sound was like a siren in the sea, full of magic that was enough to make people addicted. Lan Murian seemed to know the meaning of the song, so she had to collect her thoughts and then smiled at the two of them, I have something else to do today, so let's talk about this victory later. Junior brother, you can think about who won this victory first. She glanced at Musian, turned into a white light and fled, flying to the back mountain. Thank you, Sister Linling, for your timely help. I will go to Tianqian City to buy you some meat buns in a few days, Musian muttered silently. In the past, his relationship with Lan Fading and Lan Mulian was relatively ambiguous, but after this trip to Lianji Peak, his relationship with his senior sister developed rapidly, and Lan Fading probably saw his and his senior sister's cultivation through the chain of desolate time at that time. Even if she didn't see it, she guessed something. Although I don't know what the sisters talked about without knowing it, I think it must be something related to him, otherwise they wouldn't want to decide a winner today. Thanks to Linling, otherwise it would be a big loss no matter who I choose today. Are you relieved? Lan Fading snorted softly, lowered her head slightly and leaned close to the boy's ear, and whispered, "Actually, I don't mind." Musian was slightly stunned, raised his head, and just met Lan Fading's charming eyes. What does Sister Fading mean? Lan Fading narrowed her eyes and smiled, "You should know what I'm talking about." Musian calmly grabbed Lan Fading's slender jade hand, and under the woman's teasing eyes, he sighed softly, "In fact, it is really difficult for me to choose between Sister Fading and Senior Sister." Lan Fading's meaning can be said to be very obvious. She doesn't mind being with her sister, but Lan Mulian is a noble and cold woman, and she is actually a little shy in her heart, but she doesn't often show it. In other words, to reconcile the relationship between the two sisters, you need to start with senior sister. If senior sister lets go, everything will be easy. Musian showed a thoughtful look. It seems that I have to go to my senior sister tonight to have an in-depth discussion and find out what she has to say. Looking at the thoughtful boy, Lan Fading used her fingertips to stir a strand of hair. Her charming eyes were full of thrilling charm. She whispered, "In fact, there is a very simple way to deal with this matter. In the back mountain." "Senior Ling Long, did you ask me to come here just for this?" Lan Murian sat in the courtyard, looking at the crystal elbow and 3 meat buns filled with spiritual chicken stuffing that Lin Ling had just brought from the herbal medicine pavilion, and fell into a brief silence. She thought that Lin Ling would come to her because he listened to her master's words, but now it seems that it was just to treat her to a crystal elbow. Lin Ling took out a cardboard and wrote, "You seem to be a little absent-minded. What happened?" "It's just some small things. Senior Linglong doesn't need to care." Lan Murian shook her head and smiled, but at the end, she couldn't help but sigh in her heart. Lan Mulian has always been loving towards his sister. Lan Mulian and Lan Fading were born to the same mother, but not long after that, their mother died of illness. In fact, in the world of cultivation, there is no such thing as death due to illness. As long as the elixir is given, ordinary people cannot be saved. It was just that at that time, the former patriarch of the Lan family was trying to reach the state of enlightenment, was bound by the shackles of heaven and earth, and eventually died under the thunder tribulation. The Lan family was in turmoil and split into 3 major forces, and Lan Mulian's biological father was the leader of one of the major forces. Although he eventually won the position of patriarch of the Lan family, during that time, Ian's father was busy cleaning up internal troubles, and his position was not yet stable, so the safest way was naturally to marry the eldest daughter of another force. Lan Mulian's biological mother was just an ordinary woman. In order to avoid the suspicion of another force, she could only be placed outside. The beautiful woman, who was already weak, suffered from the cold. Later, the wife of the head of the Lan family found out that her husband had another woman outside, so she was secretly made to make things difficult for her. For her husband, the woman endured all this silently. Until she died, she told the 2 sisters not to cause trouble and avoid unnecessary trouble for that person. Because of this, the 2 sisters hated scumbags since they were born, but in the end, they fell in love with the same man by chance. Although this man was fickle, Lan Mulian was confident that he would never abandon her no matter what. He was just a scumbag, but he would not be irresponsible. In the past, she would give her sister everything she wanted, but this time, she didn't want to do it anyway, but she didn't want to be estranged from her sister because of this, so her relationship with Musian has always been in an extremely delicate state. But it happened that her sister saw what she was thinking and even deliberately used words to provoke her. Either you go or I go, sister, you decide for yourself. This is probably what Lan Fading wanted to express at that time. So Lan Mulian had kept a certain distance from Musian for a long time, but the night before yesterday, he pushed him. Even though the roles seem to be reversed, she is indeed the one who took the initiative. Now she has no regrets after practicing double cultivation with Musian, but her sister obviously doesn't want to give up, so Lan Mulian herself doesn't know how things will turn out. Fei Ying seemed to know about my junior brother and I, but what exactly was she thinking? Lan Mulian raised her head slightly and looked at the rain curtain outside the courtyard, and fell into a daze for a long time. At this time, she seemed to smell a faint scent of medicine. Lan Mulian raised her head and saw Lin Ling taking out a round and deep black pill from her arms. Lan Mulian hesitated for a moment and asked, "Senior Spirit Dragon, is this?" Lin Ling lowered her head and wrote on the cardboard, "This is what she left for you." Lan Mulian's eyes flashed slightly, and after staring at the elixir for a long time, he said softly, refining the void pill, "Does Master know what path I am taking?" From her previous practice to the present, Lan Mulian's state has been stuck in the realm of returning to the void. This is not because she has not practiced hard, but because she has taken a different path from the Dongzhou monks. After returning to the void after 9 turns, you can skip the stage of enlightenment and directly join the path. The rules of heaven and earth restrict monks from only being able to advance one level from returning to the void to reaching enlightenment. The path Lan Mulian took was to directly skip the realm of enlightenment and advance to a higher level. She doesn't even need to resonate with the 3 realms of heaven, earth, and people to be able to merge with the Tao, because she will resonate with the Tao. The holy body of destiny peeked into the origin of all things, and even glimpsed a trace of the origin of the Great Avenue. And this void refining pill can allow her to break through a level again and reach the level of returning to the void in the 4th transformation. Lin Ling raised the wooden sign again, and the crooked words on it emerged, "You can meditate and practice peacefully here during the day. I will protect you and shield the secrets. If nothing happens, it can be refined in 5 hours." Lan Mulian quickly calmed down his thoughts, showed an ice-breaking smile, and said, "Thank you, Senior." It's night. The sound of rain outside gradually died down. Musian wandered around outside Yueling Hall for a while. After confirming that no one was there, he immediately got into the door of Lan Mulian's room. Boom boom. He knocked lightly on the door and shouted softly, "Senior sister, can I come in? I want to chat with you and promise not to do bad things." After a while, there was still no response from the room. "If you don't speak, I'll take it as your acquiescence." Musian opened the door, stepped across the threshold and entered the room, and saw the beauty in the white dress who was leaning in front of the quilt and reading at night. The candlelight illuminated the moon-white dress, and the beauty mark under the right eyebrow added a bit of charm to it. The long and curled eyelashes caught the light of the candlelight, and the snow-white skin was dyed with a layer of charm. Warm glow. Musian stepped forward calmly, put the white robe on her shoulders, and said softly, "Senior sister, why are you still reading if you don't meditate and rest so late?" Lan Mulian raised her eyes and glanced at him lightly, saying, "What's the matter with you?" Being willing to talk to me means that she was just pretending to be angry. Musian was overjoyed, sat down next to Lan Mulian, and said with a smile, "It's okay, I just want to chat with senior sister, okay?" Lan Mulian said oh, didn't want to pay attention to him, and looked at the book silently. Musian suddenly sighed and said, I know that senior sister is still worried about what happened the night before yesterday, but senior Kingdi had just arrived at that time, and there was nothing I could do. Junior brother, have you finished speaking? If there is nothing else, please come back, Lan Mulian replied coldly. I won't leave. I will stay here with senior sister tonight. Musian shook his head and replied firmly. Lan Mulian snorted coldly and said calmly, Junior brother, if you don't go to accompany your Taoist companion and stay with me late at night, don't you worry about other people being jealous. Musian shook his head and said, I will accompany my senior sister tonight. It doesn't matter who comes. No matter what, I must compensate senior sister. At the end of the sentence, he reached out and held Lan Mulian's soft little hand. For some reason, the senior sister's slender hands were usually slightly cool, but the little hand she held today, although as smooth and soft as jade, did not feel as cool as before. But Musian didn't think about it carefully. After all, the beauty was by his side at the moment, not to mention that the other party didn't have any intention of resisting. Musian naturally knew what signal this meant. He hugged Lan Mulian's waist, then raised his head, and under the gaze of the woman's beautiful eyes that shone with strange luster, he occupied her soft lips. For some reason, Lan Mulian was unusually proactive tonight. After being reserved for a while, he hugged the back of Musian's head with both hands. Musian felt as if he had fallen into a sweet trap carefully woven by a woman. Middle. And even though he knew it was a trap, he fell into it willingly. After a moment, their lips parted, and Lan Mulian breathed out softly. Sensing the young man's fiery eyes, 2 blushes appeared on her plain white face, adding a bit of coquettishness to the coldness. Her red lips came close to Musian's ear, and a clear and melodious voice came leisurely, is the so-called compensation only to this extent? Boom boom. The heartbeat quickened, accompanied by Musian's rapid breathing. He raised his head and looked at this light and elegant beauty in a white dress. Feeling the ambiguous breathing between the two, looking at the woman's moist eyes, soft and glossy lips, and her beautiful face that exuded a cool and charming atmosphere at this moment. Such provocative words were just adding fuel to the fire for Musian at this moment. He suddenly bent down, reached out, and hugged Lan Mulian's plump and sexy body, and walked towards the bed not far away. Snap! A red embroidered shoe on Lan Mulian's foot fell to the ground. She glanced at the boy charmingly and laughed softly, It's really hard for you to let you hug my sister in this posture, I'm so lucky that you can hug me, gotta move. Musian looked down at the beauty in his arms and said with a smile, Senior sister is not heavy, how can she not be able to hold her? He gently placed Lan Mulian in front of the bed, lowered his head and stared at this cold beauty, about to lower his head to occupy the woman's soft lips. But at this moment, I suddenly heard a slightly familiar footsteps not far away. Musian's head skipped a beat, wondering why there were still people hanging around outside at this time. He opened his spiritual consciousness and soon noticed the owner of the aura outside. Who did I think it was, but it turned out to be senior sister. Musian was stunned for a moment. He looked at the cold beauty on the bed, and his mind fell into a brief downtime. You are the senior sister, then who is the senior sister outside? Musian's mind flashed like lightning. Soon, he seemed to have thought of something terrible, and stared at the cold beauty on the bed with a teasing smile on her face. Then, he shouted with difficulty, Sister Fei Ying. At the same time, the footsteps of the woman outside finally stopped at the door of the room. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 413. I should have thought of it earlier. With my sister's reserved and cold personality, how could she be so proactive tonight? Besides, she just saw me and Yao Meng being intimate the night before yesterday, and it was by her bedside where she was sleeping. Because she is not my sister at all. After all, my sister's beauty mole is not on the right side, but on the left side. At this moment, Musian was suddenly awakened by the beautiful woman in white dress with a playful smile on her face on the bed. It's not that he couldn't recognize the two sisters, but who would have thought that the younger sister would not only change into her sister's clothes when her sister left, but even be in her sister's room with the man her sister liked. At this moment, Musian really wanted to cover his face and bury his head, unable to bear to look directly. Sister Fading, I really start to doubt whether you are from Tiandeo now. Musian lowered his voice and gave this charming woman a speechless look. Lan Fading narrowed her beautiful eyes and said jokingly, in a sense, I am indeed the one chosen by heaven, and you are right. Also, if you don't want to be discovered by your sister, you'd better carry this talisman with you now. She took out a talisman that exuded a dark aura from her arms. This is the prop I was given for completing the system task in the past. With it, you can conceal your own aura. Sister is a holy body of destiny. Any creature hiding around her will be exposed, but she will not doubt me, nor will she use her spiritual sense to scan my body. Lan Fading looked at him with a smile. Of course, as for whether to hide or not, it's up to you to decide. Creaky. While the two were talking, there was a slight sound of a door opening outside the house. Musian gritted his teeth and grabbed the black talisman. The next moment, his aura was completely restrained. A faint smile flashed across Lan Fading's beautiful eyes. The moon-white dress could not cover her graceful figure at all. Her full and upright chest was highlighted under the thin lapels. Soon, a pair of slender and soft hands quietly hooked Musian's neck, and then hugged him in his arms. The soft and fragrant breath wrapped around his body, but Musian had no intention of enjoying it at all. This woman will have to be beaten sooner or later. If she was caught by the senior sister, she would probably light the teleportation captive in her hand and send him to the basement for training. At the same time, the candlelight in the room was extinguished by Lan Fading's fingers. The door was quietly opened. In front of the door, stood a cold woman, wearing a moon-white long dress and a cloak embroidered with green patterns. She had a light and elegant temperament. Although she did not show much skin on her body, she gave people the feeling of an abstinent beauty. Lan Murian glanced at the room, and then calmly looked at her sister who was sleeping on her bed, even wearing her clothes. Then, a cold and pleasant female voice came, "Why did you come to my room today?" Lan Fading lay on her side in the quilt, playing with a strand of hair with her slender hands, and smiled nonchalantly, "Can't you talk to your sister if you have nothing to do?" The elegant and cold beauty glanced at her sister lightly, and then looked at her clothes with a strange look. "It's okay to just talk, but why are you still wearing my clothes?" When she said this, the tall and cold beauty took off her green cloak and hung it on the hanger. She walked to the bed and sat down with her long hair loose, outlining her exquisite and protruding figure. If Musian could see the scene at this moment, he would sigh, "This woman is really destined to be with me." Unlike any woman Musian had known before, Lan Murian had a perfect figure. She was not the kind of body that looked weak and frail, but the kind of body that exuded the sexiness of a gym girl, with just the right amount of delicate and tight white skin. At first glance, you could tell that she was a top-notch beauty. Lan Murian stared at her sister with doubts, and continued, "Also, where are your own clothes?" Lan Fading smiled brightly, "I happened to see your clothes when I came to my sister's room today. I thought about how we often exchanged each other's clothes when we were young, so I decided to do it on the spur of the moment." Lan Murian was silent for a moment, and the cold expression she had always maintained in front of outsiders also softened quietly. "At that time, Mother needed to raise the two of us alone. Just food and shelter were a problem. You and I are of similar height, so changing clothes is like changing into a new dress, but why did you suddenly think of this today?" Lan Fading said lightly, "Lan Wu came to see me a few days ago. Lan Wu is the young master of the Lan family, the son of the second Taoist partner of the head of the Lan family, and the elder brother of the Lan sisters. The first Taoist partner married by the head of the Lan family has never given birth to an heir, so the position of the young master of the Lan family has come to Lan Wu. Not long ago, the head of the Lan family asked Lan Wu to personally invite the two sisters to return to the Lan family, so that the father and daughter could meet. Lan Mulian raised his eyebrows slightly and sneered, "Don't pay attention to him. Now you and I are in the Lianji section. Even if you don't return to the Lan family, they can't do anything." Lan Feiying was silent. "Is it because of Lan Wu that you remembered the past?" Lan Mulian asked. Lan Feiying nodded lightly, but quickly shook her head. "It's not all because of him, but also to remind myself not to forget that it was my mother who brought us up, and that so-called father didn't care until she was seriously ill. I never saw her for the last time." Lan Mulian was silent, silently looking at the charming and sexy woman in front of the bed, whose figure and appearance were similar to hers, but whose eyes were filled with sparkling light. "So you put on my clothes to remind me not to forget the past situation?" she asked. Lan Feiying looked at her sister in the dim light with a subtle expression. She could clearly feel Musian's breathing in her heart. She gently stroked Musian's soft hair in the dim light and said with a smile, "Yes, but not entirely. I just sometimes think that my sister is really good. She is very talented, and she is a disciple of the sect master. She has a respected status. Even if you don't have to pursue the person you like, the person you like will actively pursue you." Lan Mulian raised her eyebrows slightly and said calmly, "He will pursue any good-looking woman. He has been intimate with you in secret in the past, right? The senior sister is so scary. She is not at the scene, but she seems to know everything." Musian felt the warm and fragrant breath of nephrite in Lan Feiying's arms. Listening to the sisters' conversation, she couldn't help but secretly complain in her heart. He knew that Lan Mulian was a smart woman, but he still didn't expect that the other party was obviously a home girl who had been in Lianji Peak all year round, but she seemed to know everything. Lan Feiying narrowed her eyes and said with a smile, "I just said that the person my sister likes will pursue her, but I didn't say who it is." "Who is he that my sister is referring to?" Lan Mulian was silent for a moment. "I remember the last time I asked you, you said that the relationship between you and him was just that of a senior fellow apprentice and a younger brother," Lan Feiying teased with a smile. The cold and elegant woman, with two intoxicating blushes on her plain white face in the dim light, glanced at her sister lightly with her beautiful eyes and said, "He and I are indeed just senior siblings." Senior sister's words made her feel less confident. Musian complained crazily in his heart. If the Sabbath comes one day and all the monks in Jiuzhu are emptied, maybe the senior sister's voice will still be floating in the world. He and I just have an ordinary relationship between senior sister and brother. At this time, as if she could read minds, Lan Feiying said with a smile, "Is the relationship between a junior brother and a junior brother considered an ordinary senior sister and brother relationship?" The moment the voice fell, Lan Mulian was obviously stunned for a moment. After a while, he looked at his sister with complicated eyes. "When did you know?" "I already knew about it when I was in Yaokai. I also know about Kingdi being intimate with him in my sister's room." Lan Feiying didn't hide it and said with a smile, "So sister really likes him, right?" Seeing that Lan Mulian remained silent, she couldn't help but ask again. After Lan Mulian was silent for a moment, he hummed softly. Although she knew that her sister might have guessed what happened between her and Musian, she still didn't know how to answer when she actually heard the other party's direct words. She thought her sister would be angry or disappointed after realizing she had been betrayed. Lan Feiying frowned, and then said quietly, "Even so, sister shouldn't do this before his body has recovered. What if it causes irreversible consequences for his body? And he might be regarded as someone with some weird quirks." "What are you talking about?" Lan Mulian glanced at her sister with her beautiful eyes, scolded her softly, then softened her eyebrows, and said softly, "Junior brother is still the same junior brother, it's just that the principle of time has rewritten time on him. I practiced dual cultivation with him before, there is nothing special about it. Hobbies. As if he didn't want to dwell on this topic any longer, Lan Mulian quickly changed the subject and said, "Are you going to give up on him?" When she finished speaking, her eyes lost their luster slightly, and she glanced darkly at the quilt covered by Jinglan Fading. This casual glance made Mu Jian jump slightly. Why did I feel that my senior sister was looking at me just now? Was it my imagination, or was she really noticed? At this time, Lan Fading suddenly sneered and said softly, "There is no reason to give up to my sister just because she likes it. That child will definitely be mine in the future." There was a strong sense of confidence in his words. Lan Mulian's red lips parted slightly, about to speak. However, at this moment, she suddenly seemed to notice something. She glanced outside the windowsill inadvertently and saw paper cranes flying gracefully from a certain direction in the distance. She lit the smokeless charcoal in the spacious bedroom, the fire was blazing, and her white dress seemed to be dancing in the wind in the firelight. Lan Mulian opened the paper crane and glanced at the contents, and her originally gentle eyebrows suddenly became a little colder. "Who wrote the letter that made my sister so angry?" the charming and sexy woman behind asked with a smile. With a sudden sound, the letter fell into the air in front of the bed. Lan Fading opened the letter and took a look at it. She raised her eyebrows slightly and said in surprise, "Lan Wu? He still doesn't give up." "It's not Lan Wu who doesn't give up, but the Lan family behind him." Lan Mulian said calmly, "The Lan family is an ancient family that pays most attention to blood. Our mother is a lowly servant in their eyes, but we are not." "Oh." Lan Fading had a charming smile on her face, but her eyes had no warmth at all. "It's really interesting. My sister and I were born to slaves in your eyes. Our blood is lowly, but we have been invited to return to the Lan family again and again. It was you who proposed to drive us and our mother away, and now it is you who want us to return to the Lan family. The so-called lowly bodies are all decided by you high-ranking people at will. Are you planning to go back?" Lan Fading suddenly broke the silence. Lan Murian said faintly, "No matter what, my mother has always been thinking about the Lan family in her past life. Sooner or later, she will go to the Lan family." She took a deep look at the charming woman in front of the bed, and then inadvertently glanced at the thick quilt, and said lightly, "Anyway, it's still time to make a decision in the next few days. I'll go alone to calm down first." Lan Fading pursed her sexy red lips and hummed softly. "Since you are going to the Lan family, I will go with you." However, at this moment, a calm voice suddenly came from the room. "You can also meet your future father-in-law by the way." Even Lan Fading did not expect Muzian to speak suddenly. Her body stiffened slightly, and it took a long time for her to relax. Lan Mulian's footsteps also paused, and she slowly turned her head to look. On the bed, sat a young man with extraordinary bearing. Although his temperament looked a little gentle at this time, it added a bit of the aura of a nobleman. Lan Fading sat on the edge with her legs bent. Her snow-white skin was faintly visible under the thin white gauze, and a pair of plump and slender white legs were revealed under the hem of her skirt. Although she was dressed coldly, her temperament was still charming and sexy. She looked at Muzian a few more times and giggled, "I thought you really planned to hide until my sister left." Muzian shrugged, "If I really hide until my senior sister leaves, I'm afraid I will feel guilty and uneasy the next time I meet her." And he really didn't think that he and Lan Fading could hide it from his senior sister. Even with the talisman given by Lan Fading, it might not be enough. Lan Fading does have a system, but the senior sister is a divine body. Throughout history, Muzian has never seen this physique. The physique of the god of the sky was a weakened version of the divine body. It is too difficult for two soul refiners to deceive a person in the return to the void realm who has a divine body. If the senior sister knew that he was in the room, it would be too difficult to regain her favor after she left. Maybe the senior sister line will collapse. Moreover, he really doesn't want to deal with the two sisters. If you have a guilty conscience, you won't be involved with so many girls. A cold and arrogant voice came from behind. Lan Murian raised her arrogant white chin, her beautiful eyebrows and eyes were majestic, and she looked down at the handsome boy. But the corners of her mouth inadvertently raised a faint arc. I thought you really planned to hide until I left. Musian smiled helplessly. I really can't defend myself on this matter, but if I hide it from my senior sister today, I will indeed feel guilty. This is not contradictory. Well, although I am intimate with my senior sister's sister, it does not prevent me from feeling guilty and uneasy about my senior sister. After all, I am a good boy. Lan Fading leaned on the bed, her long and soft hair was scattered, a little lazy and messy, and her green jade fingers poked his forehead, complaining like a scolding, you feel guilty about your sister, but not about me. I will naturally feel guilty about Sister Fading. Musian said sincerely. Lan Fading narrowed her eyes and suddenly asked casually, you just said that you plan to meet your future father-in-law, so are you going to take your sister to meet your father-in-law, or? She glanced at him, take me. The room fell into a brief silence. The eyes of the charming woman and the cold woman fell on Musian almost at the same time. For them, no matter who Musian chose, they could accept the other party. After all, the person who chose was Musian. However, under the gaze of the two sisters, Musian slowly shook his head, I don't want to choose senior sister, but I won't choose Sister Fading either. Lan Fading's beautiful eyes flashed slightly, and the senior sister frowned slightly, and was about to speak. At this time, Musian suddenly reached out and hugged his sister's plump waist, and then gently exerted force to pull her close. At the same time, he grabbed his sister's slender jade hand with his other hand and said, I want to take you back to the Lan family together. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 414. Musian has always considered himself a reserved and stable man, so he never likes to express his love for another girl in front of one girl. He has always held this view, but this time is different. He doesn't know whether the senior sister knows that he was hiding in the house just now, but he doesn't want to gamble. Rather than taking the risk of being caught by the senior sister later, it's better to be frank now. The relationship between him and the Lan sisters will be exposed sooner or later. Rather than having bad things like sisters fighting each other later, Musian would rather take a gamble tonight. After all, if they were to fight in the future, they would probably tear him apart first. So, he wanted to bet on the deep sisterly love between Sister Fading and senior sister, betting that even if he broke this window paper tonight, they would not lock themselves in the basement. Of course, if the bet was wrong, he could only wait for Sister Yet or the maid who had been protecting him in secret to save him. Lan Murian glanced at the little hand that was hugging her slender waist, and then at the boy holding his sister's hand. His eyes suddenly became a little more unfriendly, and he said coldly, Junior brother is really brave, what do you mean now? I admit that I have a gambling element, but my feelings for you are sincere. Musian coughed lightly and said, I naturally know what it means for me to do this now, and I will be responsible for my actions. As he said, he glanced at the pair of exquisite sisters beside him. Although both of them were wearing their sister's white dress at the moment, their temperaments were obviously completely opposite. On the surface, Lan Murian still seemed to be aloof at the moment, and even her beautiful face was covered with frost, and she exuded an aura that seemed to freeze people. If ordinary people saw this scene, they would probably be terrified, and even retreat. But if you look more carefully, you will find that the cold and noble temperament of the senior sister in the past obviously revealed a trace of panic, and there were two blushes on her face. Her eyes flickered slightly, and she looked a little more charming and less aloof than usual. Lan Fading bent her legs, lazy and charming, looking at Musian with a playful look. I thought you really planned to hide until my sister left, she said with a smile. Musian looked at this charming beauty and suddenly remembered some things that happened when he was with her in Tianqian City. He couldn't help shaking his head and said helplessly, "So you really don't think we can hide it from senior sister, right?" He almost immersed himself in Lan Feiying's gentleness today and threw away the most basic thinking. Senior sister is the first young generation in Zhuzhu to return to the Void Realm, so her talent is beyond words. How could such a smart woman not notice the clues in the room? Lan Feiying laughed and said, "I really don't think I can hide it from my sister, but I really want to help you hide it so that she won't notice it. After all." She raised her charming eyes and looked at the beautiful woman in a white dress who was sitting upright and seemed a little uncomfortable with the atmosphere in the room. She smiled and said, "If my sister knew that you and I were intimate in her room, she would definitely be angry." Musian laughed and said, "If Sister Feiying really wanted to help me, she wouldn't wear my sister's clothes and pretend to be her." Lan Feiying snorted and stroked a strand of hair, "Although my sister and I are similar, there are still differences. Can't you tell the difference? This topic is a bit dangerous. If we continue talking, it will probably turn into, if you really like us, how can you not even recognize which of us is the elder sister? Of course you can tell them apart, but it's hard to tell in that situation just now." Musian paused and changed the subject, "And Sister Feiying is good at disguise. I was also deceived by you when I was in Tianqian City before. In a sense, I am now able to be vigilant against others, and part of the reason is thanks to Sister Feiying's training in the past." Lan Feiying's heart moved slightly. She wanted to say, "Brother, you yourself have changed from a pure boy to a dandy boy, and now you have become an outstanding fish pond owner. What does this have to do with me?" But she thought of the past when she was still in Chenexai auction house. Musian often came to the auction house to see her under the pretext of auctioning items. After a few times, she could naturally sense Musian's thoughts, so she also flirted with him a few times, saying that he was still too young and not mature enough. In the next 1 or 2 years, Musian seemed to realize the power of the Mu family in Tianqian City, so he gradually became unscrupulous and became a playboy. He found many girls to be intimate with, and after meeting her at the auction house, he would no longer be the passive party like in the past. Perhaps for Musian at that time, the so-called maturity and stability meant that he could face any woman with ease. If you think about it carefully, it's really fate. "I didn't expect that you could receive the paper cranes thrown by your sister in Tianqian City," Lan Feiying said with a sigh. "I think it's fate. The big sister I liked when I was in Tianqian City and my online friend are actually sisters," Musian complained in his heart. At this time, Lan Mulian looked at Musian with a hint of strangeness in his eyes and asked, "So you mistook Feiying for me just now?" Musian said helplessly, "Sister Feiying is dressed almost exactly like senior sister now, so it wouldn't be strange if I made a mistake, right? Besides, the room was dim before, so it was naturally difficult to recognize. Although you mistook me for your sister before, then what do you mean by this action now?" Lan Feiying's words pulled Lan Mulian back to reality from her previous thoughts. Lan Mulian immediately reacted, and her eyes inadvertently glanced at Musian's action of holding Lan Feiying's soft little hand, with a hint of shame flashing in her cold eyes. At this moment, on this soft bed, there were 2 women and 1 man. And Lan Mulian herself was one of them. 2 sisters were intimate with the same person, such a shameless thing. If it was the past Lan Mulian, I'm afraid she would only look at it with contempt, and then retract her proud head, expressing her contempt for this man in her heart. After all, she was the only genius in the Return to Void Realm in Zhuzhu, the champion of the Ascension Conference, and she had countless suitors in Dongzhou. How could she have thought that she would be in the same room with Feiying and be intimate with the same boy? Lan Murian gently pushed away Musian's little hand, pursed her lips to make them more moist, and said in a calm and cold tone, "Junior brother, please respect yourself." Musian looked at this woman silently. He had known for a long time that this woman was extremely arrogant. Even though her icy face was showing an intoxicating blush at this moment, she still sat upright and maintained her arrogance. Although Musian seemed to wander among flowers all year round, he was still a little intimidated by such an inhuman attitude shown by such a cold and noble woman. But fortunately, after being intimidated, Musian looked at Lan Murian a few more times, and the inferior breast volume that proudly supported the fabric when she raised her chest. The next moment, he felt a little more courage. He reached out and grasped Lan Murian's cool little hand on his knee. The soft touch was as cool as jade, white and delicate. Musian could clearly feel that when he held her hand tightly, Lan Murian's body trembled slightly. Who do you plan to choose, junior brother? Window. Tabula equals window. Tabula. Tabula.push, mode, thumbs feed -01, container, tabula below article feed, placement, below article feed, target. Type, mix. Lan Murian turned her face away and looked to the side. A strand of hair lazily rested on her snow-white face, taking advantage of her beautiful face. I said before that the person I want to choose is not senior sister or sister Feiying, Musian said seriously. At this time, Lan Feiying suddenly said quietly, do you know what my sister and I experienced in the past? Musian hesitated and nodded silently. He did hear a little about Ian's father, but he only talked with his senior sister in the past and vaguely guessed it when he communicated with Lan Wu before. In order to become the patriarch, Ian's father had to temporarily put the birth mother of the Lan sisters aside. As a result, Ian's father never met his wife again until his death. Even now, Ian's mother's spirit tablet cannot be sent to the Lan family because it is not recognized by the elders of the Lan family. And the two sisters naturally hate the scumbag very much. But what does the scumbag have to do with me, Musian? I know what Sister Feiying wants to say, but I just happen to be sentimental, and by chance, I just like my senior sister and Sister Feiying at the same time. Musian shook his head and sighed, explaining himself. Don't link him, Musian, with the scumbag. He is just sentimental. Is there anything wrong with liking two sisters at the same time? So far, he has never done anything to make the girls around him heartbroken. On the contrary, he usually contributes the spiritual energy of his natural furnace, and even the natural materials and treasures around him are first thought of by his Taoist partner, so that the spiritual energy of the natural furnace has never been filled. The furnace has not been fully refilled, and it is almost dry again. As if he remembered some bad memories, Musian subconsciously rubbed his waist. The blazing charcoal fire was burning, and the room was filled with warm firelight. On the bed, Lan Murian, wearing a white dress, slightly sideways, glanced at Musian coldly, and said faintly, you like any beautiful woman, it's not just me and Feiying. Musian shook his head helplessly, just who is so big, there are many beautiful women, and I don't like everyone, all this is just a coincidence. Does senior sister think that when I wrote to you, I would know that you and Sister Feiying are sisters? Lan Murian fell silent. This is true, and she couldn't refute it for a while. Musian sighed and said, at the beginning, I didn't know that Sister Feiying was originally from the Lan family. In the end, it was me who was fooled by you two. Lan Murian glanced at the handsome boy and said coldly, it's not that I don't want to tell you, but I haven't found the right time. It's obviously just to tease me, Musian complained in his heart. Then, he suddenly asked, senior sister, don't you want to believe me? Lan Murian was slightly stunned, and didn't understand what Musian said for a while. You and Sister Feiying are both people I like, so this time you go to the Lan family, whether senior sister agrees or not, I will go with you, Musian said. Lan Feiying frowned and said faintly, this time we are not going to the Lan family for fun. If you go with us, I am afraid you will be targeted. Their relationship with the Lan family is already delicate. This time they may go to the Lan family for their mother's matter, but if Musian goes with them, I am afraid that other descendants of the Lan family will look at him with strange eyes. After all, Musian already has a Taoist partner, and now he is with them. It is inevitable that people will gossip. Musian shook his head and smiled. I was born open and honest. Even if I am secretly pointed at or targeted, it doesn't matter. I will not feel at ease if I let you two go back by yourselves. It doesn't make much sense for you to go with us in the refining god realm, Lan Mulian said coldly. It sounds like she is disdaining Musian's cultivation, but in fact, it is just that the cold outward but warm-hearted senior sister is worried about his safety. Musian smiled and said, Senior sister, have you forgotten that I was suppressed by the refining spirit realm a few days ago? These are two different things. I was suppressed because, Lan Mulian glared at Musian, but her eyes were extremely complicated. She knew that she should be angry at this time, scolding him for having the nerve to put his philandering in the open, and even so shamelessly hugging both of them in his arms. But when she saw Musian's face, she couldn't get angry at all. On the contrary, Fei Ying didn't seem to get angry from the beginning. Lan Mulian glanced at the charming woman beside Musian and said faintly, Don't you mind? It's not the first day I met him, I already knew this guy's fickleness. If it was another woman here tonight, I would naturally mind. Lan Feiying looked at her cold and beautiful sister and smiled charmingly, but if it was my sister, we could even wear clothes together when we were young, why can't men? No one knows me better than Sister Feiying. Musian was moved. But he was about to speak, but he heard Lan Feiying suddenly change her tone and said, You haven't recovered yet, so stay in Lianji Peak. The affairs of the Lan family are a murky pool, and you don't need to wade into it. Lan Murian looked at her sister with complicated eyes, and also hummed, saying, Feiying and I will handle this matter ourselves, you just stay in Lianji Peak to recuperate. When she said the last part, she suddenly chuckled, there are other women in Lianji Peak now, and you can secretly make out with them while Feiying and I are not here. Lan Murian's voice suddenly stagnated, and her body was gently pushed to the bed behind her by Musian. At the same time, there was another charming and sexy beauty beside her. Musian looked at the two beauties with completely opposite temperaments on the bed. The best sisters also looked at him with their eyes. The sisters' peach blossom eyes were passionate and charming, with a moist luster, and the sister's face was cold, noble and cold, but there was a shy and flustered look in her eyes. I am also the son-in-law of the Lan family. This is a matter between us, so naturally we have to go together to deal with it, Musian said softly. As for the Lan family's affairs that senior sister mentioned, they are extremely complicated and muddy. He, Musian, has seen everything in his life, from refining essence to becoming a fairy. He can even suppress the only female emperor in the Yuhua realm in Zhuzhou with one hand. The Lan family is indeed an ancient family with a deep foundation in Dongzhou, but so what? It's not like he hasn't been locked up in the basement before, although that was just a little joke Yao Meng played on him. He is not afraid of the Yuhua realm, so why should he be afraid of the Lan family? Lan Feiying's beautiful eyes were moist, she bit her lips lightly, stared at Musian, and suddenly laughed, You are really awesome. Musian lowered his head and kissed his sister's lips, put his hand on his sister's cold face, and said softly, More awesome is yet to come. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 415. Dongzhou Lan family, what kind of force is this? If anything, most families in Dongzhou would be respectful or even flattering when facing this behemoth. Dongzhou is so big that ordinary monks may not be able to leave it after several years, and its rich historical heritage has naturally spawned many ancient families. But among them, there are too few ancient families that have produced powerful Hedao powers. The ancestor of the Lan family once had a great master in the Hedeo realm. To this day, the Lan family's ancestral artifact, the immortal cauldron, is still stored deep in the Lan family's ancestral land, serving as a deterrent. Excluding the Forbidden Area, Lianji sect, and the increasingly prosperous Yaokai Holy Land, the Lan family is the largest ancient family in East Continent. The larger the power, the deeper the foundation. In the past, there were some families in Dongzhou that were founded less than a century ago and were so powerful that they even vaguely threatened the status of ancient families. But compared to those ancient aristocratic families that often have 1,000 or even 10,000 years of foundation, they are still far behind. Maybe on the surface the two sides have similar strength, but the accumulated foundation is not comparable to those of ordinary families. A large part of the reason why the Lan family is able to rank among the top ranks of the Eastern continent is because of the inheritance left by the ancestors of the Lan family. Ancestral artifacts, emperor-level medicinal materials, and even heaven-level techniques and so on. Because of this huge force will hold an ancestor worship meeting every 4 years to pay homage to the deceased ancestor of the Lan family. This time, the Lan family has less than 2 months left before the ancestor worship meeting. Lan Wu would personally go to Liangyi sect to invite the Lan sisters before. It was precisely because of this ancestor worship meeting that he hoped that the two sisters could take this opportunity to recognize their ancestors and return to the clan. However, the two sisters were too stubborn and didn't want to pay attention to it at all. At this moment, on a soft and comfortable bed, Lan Feiying had already changed into a fiery red dress. She was leaning on the bed, with a few strands of hair stuck to the white jade neck. She was more revealing than before. With a bit of a girly temperament, she now has a more mature charm. The senior sister was sitting next to her younger sister, wearing a thin white gauze dress, revealing a pair of plump and slender snow-white legs under her thigh-high panties. The gauze clothes were bulging, revealing her proud figure. Musian lay on Lan Mulian's beautiful legs, glanced left and right, then glanced at the invitation in his hand, and said thoughtfully, "So it seems that Lan Wu treats you sincerely? He hopes that you can recognize your ancestors and become a member of the Lan family, so that you can have a safe place in Kyushu in the future." Lan Wu may have thought about it a lot, but the Lan family is not united. If Fei Ying and I go to the Lan family in the future, Lan Wu will not have the final say alone, Lan Mulian said coldly. Musian pondered for a moment, and while playing with senior sister's slightly cold hands, he said, "Senior sister is worried that after you go to Ian's house, they will force you to stay in Ian's house." Lan Feiying stroked Musian's forehead hair and said lightly, "Liangyi sect is indeed a talisman for the outside disciples, but the matters between the Lan family and us are considered family affairs. If we really go there by then, unless we really his personal safety is threatened, otherwise the Liangyi sect would not be able to interfere." Musian was silent. This is true. After all, the head of the Lan family is the biological father of the senior sisters and the others. If something happens to the Lan family when the time comes, it will also be a family matter. So I will go to the Lan family with you 2 months later. If anything happens, I can take care of you, Musian said. Lan Mulian frowned lightly, shook his head and said, "In your current state, I'm afraid that just leaving Liangyi Peak will cause quite a stir. Before that, I can return to my original appearance." Musian shook his head. Lan Mulian's eyes flickered slightly, and he looked at the handsome young man lying on his lap, silent. In other words, junior brother can only maintain this cute look for a limited time. Lan Mulian was about to speak, but he saw his sister stretched out her toes and hooked Musian's waist, narrowing her eyes and smiling. "That's why we should cherish this time even more, after all, it will be gone in the future." Lan Mulian showed displeasure and said coldly, "He has consumed a lot of spiritual energy today, so let him meditate and rest alone." "It depends on whether the child wants to rest." Lan Feiying stood up, leaned on Musian's shoulder, looked at her sister, and said with a soft smile, "If my sister feels sorry for him, Just watch from the side. We'll be fine. At the end of her sentence, under the cold gaze of her sister's dissatisfaction, she deliberately approached Musian's ear and asked in a gentle and sweet voice, "You said what my sister said, right?" Why had I never noticed that the sister was so shameless before? Lan Mulian blushed, turned away, and planned to get out of bed and leave. However, at this time, Musian held senior sister's soft little hand in time, raised his head and showed a sweet and gentle smile. "I don't worry about senior sister going out so late, so I'd better stay here and practice in peace." "Can I practice with peace of mind if I stay here?" Lan Mulian glanced at him angrily and said angrily. But looking at her sister on the bed, and feeling Musian's direct and fiery eyes, she felt a little shy, blushed, and turned her head away. The candlelight was dim, and the cold beauty standing in front of the bed was shy and timid, looking like she was ready to take whatever you wanted. She pursed her lips slightly, and her curled eyelashes were trembling slightly because of shyness and uneasiness. This kind of stunning and cold face, and even the shy look that is completely different from the usual one, there is probably no other such charming charm in the world. Musian took the hand of his senior sister and dragged her into the bed, then turned his head to look at Lan Feiying, whose face was also flushed and her beautiful eyes were moist and seductively staring at him. He leaned down slightly and occupied her plump red lips. The candlelight extinguished in the swaying, and the curtain was drawn, and the room fell into darkness. The next day, early morning. Musian left the room in the morning and changed his clothes, refreshed, and stretched lazily in the courtyard. "It seems that you were very refreshing last night. Today, your steps are a little frivolous." A voice that was so cold that it seemed to freeze the air came from not far behind him, and someone stared at him silently in the shadows. As soon as Musian turned his head, a beautiful figure in a yellow skirt appeared behind him. From Musian's perspective, he could only see the maid proudly holding up her full and straight chest, looking down at the young master with a condescending look, as if looking at a bug. "Sister Mengru, good morning." Musian smiled slightly. Then, he paused and continued, "Sorry, I have worried you these days." Wei Mengru snorted coldly, "I am just a maid beside you, I dare not accept your apology." Obviously, Sister Mengru was angry, the kind that is hard to coax. Although she has always positioned herself as a maid, she used to be able to look coldly at the young master and other girls being affectionate, and even look down on them, but now that she has established a relationship with the young master, although she has always hinted that she is the young master's maid, she sometimes still feels sour in her heart. Musian tried to get closer to Wei Mengru and hugged her slender waist from behind. Wei Mengru sensed the warm breath coming from behind her, and her body suddenly stiffened. She glanced at him dimly, then turned away silently, saying, "Young master, please respect yourself. Aren't you afraid of being seen by others? I am the Lord of Heaven. How can I be afraid of them?" Musian said softly, "I know Sister Mengru is angry with me, but my relationship with them has been very ambiguous for a long time, you should also know this." Wei Mengru pouted and refused to speak. She has always been following the young master like a shadow. She has seen the young master go to the Chenexai auction house to find Lan Feiying before, so she naturally knows the relationship between Musian and the Lan sisters. But when she thought about being ignored since she entered Lianji Peak in the past few days, she felt a little awkward. She clearly hoped that the young master would forget about her and stop harassing her and bothering her every day. But if he really forgets about her one day, she will feel inexplicably uncomfortable. In fact, no matter how many girls I have around me, there is only one maid named Mengro. I have wanted to see Mengro these days, but you can see that I am really too busy these days." Musian smiled and spoke, his voice was gentle, showing his sincere attitude. "This is not an excuse, but he is really too busy. The fish in the fish pond have gradually grown up. If they are not careful, they may be seen in the small dark room. Musian has to be careful when operating now. Wei Mengru glanced at the young master behind her coldly and said contemptuously, "Accept me, no one wants to be your maid." But after hearing what Musian said, Wei Mengru's original unpleasant feeling in her heart was indeed much less, and her eyebrows and eyes softened a little. Thinking about it carefully, it is true. The young master can have many Taoist companions, but there is only one maid. I have always been by the young master's side in the past and am very familiar with his personality. In this world, except for his parents, she is the only one who knows Musian best. Wei Mengru looked at the young master's hands tightly hugging her plump waist, and subconsciously pinched the skirt formula. Then, she put her slender hand on the back of Musian's hand as if nothing had happened, and suddenly whispered, "When will your body recover?" After this, Musian was relieved immediately. If nothing unexpected happens, Yao Meng should come to me in a few days. After that, I am afraid that I will go to Yuzhou with her. I think after taking Tagzapil, I should be able to restore my original age. That being said, he was not sure whether Tagzapil would work, but he could always try it. Wei Mengru stared at Musian and said, "I want to go with you too." Musian pondered for a moment, then nodded slightly. Now that Wei Mengru has obtained the great fortune of two chosen people and the bad luck has been suppressed, it is still unknown whether the bad luck will come to her again if she leaves him for too long. A few days would be fine, but if it takes longer, it might not be possible to suppress the bad luck in the body. There is no need to take this risk. Wei Mengru nodded with satisfaction, looking at the young master behind her. Soon, as if she sensed something strange, she turned her head with a red face and glanced at him with disdain. "It has become like this now, and you are still thinking about that kind of thing." Musian said helplessly, "This is just a physiological reaction." As soon as the voice fell, Wei Mengru glanced around inadvertently. There was no one in Lianji Peak in the early morning, only the master and servant in the courtyard were chatting here. Wei Mengru took the young master's hand, noticed his doubtful gaze, raised the corner of her mouth slightly, leaned down slightly, and deliberately teased, "Young master, you must be tired from practicing yesterday." Her fingertips gently stroked Musian's face, and she said jokingly, "Sister will take you back to the room to rest." In the blink of an eye, another half a month passed unknowingly. In the past half-month, in addition to meditating and practicing in the heavenly court for an hour every day, Musian assisted the protagonists around him in practicing. If nothing unexpected happens, Ruoxi and the others should be able to refine their spirits and return to the void in the next few days, which is not in vain for my efforts during this period of time. I just don't know if they will be so gentle and harmonious to me after the other spiritual consciousness in their bodies awakens. At this moment, Musian was at the top of Lianji Peak, looking down at this silent mountain. He was in sage mode for a while and inevitably felt a little more worried. After refining the spirit and returning to the void, both Gong Lianyu and the original witch no longer need to continue sleeping, which is equivalent to having an extra golden finger in their bodies that can enter the state of harmony at any time. The original witch is okay. The first wife treats him very kindly and has never taken out the ancestral weapon such as the immortal devouring lock to restrain him. But Gong Lianyu is different. The Sword Palace Master has an arrogant personality. Once awakened, Ruoxi, who has no bad intentions, will probably turn half black. I don't know what he will become at that time. But in fact, he is not very weak. After all, the heart lock is by Ruoxi's weapon when he was in the spirit refining state. If he is really restricted by the heart lock one day, he can also use the heaven measure ruler to untie the restraint. Come to think of it, I am the lord of the heavenly court. Even if Yao Meng is here, I can suppress her on the spot. Why should I be afraid of a mere heart lock? Thinking of this, Musian felt a little more relaxed. In the distance, leaden clouds gradually moved slowly with the wind. The heavy cloud slowly rotated like a whirlpool, and lightning flashed. Musian looked up and saw the direction of Kanghai Peak. A few days ago, Ruoxi meditated in seclusion in Kanghai Peak. With the help of the energy of heaven, he seemed to have taken the lead in entering the threshold of returning to the void. Ruoxi is indeed the first protagonist to refine the spirit and return to the void. It is worth my hard work day and night during this period. Musian stood in front of the peak, looking at the snow mountain with sea blue patterns and the beauty in white palace skirt on the top of Kanghai Peak, and couldn't help but talk to himself with relief. I just don't know what's going on with Yao Meng, although I am quite strong at this age, sometimes it is inconvenient to pick up the beauty when I am in a good mood. Looking at the vast and incomparable ninefold thunder tribulation brewing on Kanghai Peak, Musian couldn't help but mutter in his heart. It has been more than half a month since Yao Meng left Lianji Peak. Now she has reached the Yuhua realm. Musian is naturally not worried about her safety, but is a little curious about where she went. She was away for half a month. Fortunately, during this period, there were sisters, senior sister and sister Feiying, accompanying her, so she would not be too lonely. It's just a pity that after sister Feiying received a lot of heavenly spiritual energy a few days ago, she seemed to have touched the path of returning to the void realm, so she temporarily returned to Tianji Peak to practice in seclusion, preparing to impact the return to the void realm. Now sister Lingxian and sister Qianer are both in seclusion at Dao Peak, sister Feiying has also gone to Tianji Peak, and senior sister is also in seclusion. The only one who can accompany me is sister Mengru. Musian turned his head to look at the yellow-skirted beauty beside him, with a bit of emotion in his tone. Beside Musian, Wei Mengru, in a yellow dress, fluttered in the cold wind, revealing her snow-white shoulders and delicate collarbones. Her full chest was perfectly curved by a waist-binding ribbon. Her round, snow-white long legs were close together under the skirt, and she was wearing a pair of delicate and small embroidered shoes. Compared with her previous aloofness, the iceberg beauty at this time obviously had a bit more mature charm than before. Well, this is also thanks to Musian's unremitting efforts. Wei Mengru glanced at him. I'm just waiting for the arrival of the Qing Emperor. Didn't you say she would come to pick you up and go to Yuzhou together? It's been more than half a month now, why hasn't she come yet? Sister Mengru is arrogant again. Did she forget how to call the master that night? Musian sighed lightly and said helplessly, maybe Yao Meng has forgotten me. Wei Mengru pouted and didn't bother to pay attention. Everyone would forget Musian, but Yao Meng would definitely not. The Green Emperor has not come back for a while. I think he is preparing the Taigzi pill that the young master needs. I just don't know why she is so obsessed with the Taigzi pill. According to the spiritual consciousness of another self in the body before, if the Green Emperor is willing, he can retreat for a period of time and completely control the principle of time, then he should be able to restore the young master's age. Musian asked for trouble, but he was not embarrassed. He smiled and said, speaking of which, Sister Mengru's previous realm was the highest among us. Hasn't she touched the threshold of the return to void realm yet? Wei Mengru glanced at him as if she was looking at a fool. Now, the only person who has not touched the return to void realm is probably you. Musian was slightly stunned. Does it mean that you have returned to the void? But I haven't seen you cross the tribulation during this period. I don't need to cross the tribulation, Wei Mengru said lightly. Musian hesitated for a moment, and then his expression was slightly enlightened. Yes, Wei Mengru's existence itself does not belong to the scope of the rules of heaven and earth, and naturally she will not experience the so-called thunder tribulation. After Wei Mengru broke through a realm, she didn't need to pass the tribulation at all. So it seems that the only ones who haven't yet refined their spirits and returned to the void are me and Qianer. But Qianer is still young, so it's not surprising. I have to hurry up and not fall behind too much. Musian, you can't always think about living off others, you have to work hard too. When Musian thought of this, he thought of the fairy in a green dress again for no reason. Taixudan can make the physique and talent of demon cultivators rise by more than one level. In the past, there was even a demon cultivator who used Taixudan to impact the Hedeo realm. If his body could really absorb the Taixu pill for his own use, he might be able to use it to at least improve 1 or 2 grades, or even reach the peak of the soul refining realm, not to mention the impact of returning to the void. I just don't know where Yao Meng is now. Musian looked up at the white-dressed beauty on the top of Canghai Peak, and the charming nine-tailed beauty behind her. It is difficult for ordinary people to see the illusory nine-tailed fox figure, but Musian has the mark left by the queen of the demon realm in his body, and can identify all the demon cultivators in the Lianji sect, and Bai Ruoxi is naturally among them. If Ruoxi can evolve into a nine-tailed fox, there will be more ways to play in the future. When he thought of this, Musian's desire for the Taixu pill became more urgent. Not far away, Bai Ruoxi was bathed in the thunder tribulation, with black and white clothes intertwined, and there seemed to be a monstrous pink light behind her, but ordinary people could not see it clearly. As if she had noticed someone's gaze, she glanced over slightly. When their eyes met, Bai Ruoxi suddenly chuckled. The silver bell-like laughter echoed in Musian's heart. There seemed to be a shadow of 9 foxtails swaying behind her, which had a charm that bewitched everyone. Musian's mind was rippled, his eyes were dazed, and his sight was uncontrollably taken away by Bai Ruoxi, as if he had forgotten everything around him for a moment. Bai Ruoxi, who had not yet refined the Taixu pill, already had such a charming posture. If she swallowed the Taixu pill in the future, the spiritual consciousness of the Sword Palace Master and Bai Ruoxi would both be in the Hedeo realm. It was terrifying to think about it. Looking back and smiling, she can fascinate men just by returning to the virtual realm. If she refines the Taixu pill in the future, I'm afraid she will be able to seduce your heart. At this time, a ray of clear light suddenly enveloped Musian, accompanied by a fairy sound like the sound of nature lingering in his ears, quietly dispelling the charming breath. Musian turned his head and said subconsciously, "Yao Meng? You are finally back." Outside Lianji Peak, Yao Meng stepped on the air with her delicate and small jade feet, stopped beside Musian, looked down at him, and smiled. "If I didn't come, you would probably become the shape that Gong Lianyu likes in a few days." Musian said helplessly, "I am not that kind of person, besides, Ruoxi is just a 3-tailed fox, not that exaggerated." "Oh." Yao Meng smiled and glanced at the maid beside him, then playfully blinked her beautiful green eyes and teased, "If so, how could your natural furnace have lost so much spiritual energy? Did you deal with your own spiritual energy?" "I haven't directed and acted for a long time," Musian coughed lightly. "Where have you been these days? I thought you were in trouble." In fact, Musian used to solve it himself, but later he was really lacking in energy and had to give up this craft. Yao Meng spread out her palms, and 13 round demon pills of different colors and rich spiritual energy appeared in her palms. She smiled and said, "Luo Tan promised to provide the medicinal materials needed for Taixu pill, so I just need to find the demon pill. I thought I would have to deal with it myself after going to the demon world, but I didn't expect that the first seat in the demon world would ask someone to send the demon pill to me in less than a week." The first seat in the demon world, Musian thought of the maid who followed the queen of the demon world, and his heart was slightly clear. "When do we leave?" Musian asked. "If you don't mind, we can go to Yuzhou in a while." The smile on Yao Meng's face was restrained a little, and she looked at Musian with complicated eyes. "However, Luo Tan said before that she wanted to meet you alone." So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 416. Luo Tan wants to see me alone? After hearing Yao Meng's words, Musian's first reaction was to feel guilty. As the female emperor of Yuzhou, who was born with the same furnace as himself and was suspected to be able to complement each other, Musian's relationship with her was a little unclear before, and now he naturally knew why she wanted to see him. However, she actually asked Yao Meng to speak up, which was something Musian didn't expect. That woman is really bold. Musian said calmly, what do you think? In short, throw the question to Yao Meng first, and test what the attitude of Sister Kingdi is. Master Mu's anti-gank awareness is already full. The Tegzapil involves the secret of the evolution of the demon race, so Luo Tan is very careful about refining the Tegzapil. That's why he wants to see you and confirm whether you really have the bloodline of the three-tailed fox in your body. It is also common sense at this time, Yao Meng said with a smile. She actually suspected Luo Tan's purpose, but thinking carefully, the status of Yuzhou's medicine emperor is so noble, even if he knows that Musian is a natural furnace, what's the harm? Since the integration of Dao, Luo Tan has seen the same natural furnace body as herself for the first time, but she has never been tempted. As for the so-called appearance and beauty, or even the auxiliary ability brought by the natural furnace, Luo Tan does not need it at all. After all, the medicine emperor is in the Hedao realm, and is the top cultivator standing in the world. To ascend to the higher level of immortality, it requires the right time, right place, and right people. Of course, the most important thing is the right people. However, Luo Tan could not know that Musian's natural furnace contains the possibility of breaking through the Hedao realm and ascending to immortality. Musian nodded slightly and said, if so, I really have to go to Yuzhou, so that Senior Medicine Emperor can rest assured. Should we set off now? Musian asked again. Although I think so, it seems that you may have to wait a while before you can leave. Yao Meng raised his head and looked at the beautiful woman who had survived the thunder tribulation and was walking towards here in the void in front of Kanghai Peak. Musian also raised his head and saw Miss Bai, whose breasts were proud of the others. Her white palace skirt decorated with red plum blossoms fluttered in the cold wind, and her hair was messy in the cold wind, but it set off her beautiful face. Behind her, it seemed that three illusory foxtails could be vaguely seen. At first glance, Musian seemed to see Bai Ruoxi, who was usually weak and sensible and not good at infighting, but after a closer look, it seemed that he saw the awe-inspiring and arrogant sword palace master in her temperament. There was even a kind of magic that attracted his eyes involuntarily. Is it because Naxi is so big that I am attracted to her, or is it because her three-tailed fox body is completely awakened after she has refined her spirit and returned to the void, and the charm she exudes attracts me? Musian complained in his heart. Malang. Sensing Musian's eyes, Bai Ruoxi looked shy, walked to Musian, and called out in a delicate voice. Musian nodded slightly, showing a look of relief. Seeing Bai Ruoxi refine her spirit and return to the void, he felt like he had cultivated a beauty, and a kind of harvest joy came from his heart. However, before Musian was immersed in Naxi's gentleness, her eyes fell directly on Yao Meng, and she smiled lightly. Is Kingdi done with his work? I thought you forgot about Malang after you ascended to heaven. A cold smile came from the top of the peak immediately. Breaking through the Hedao is just a matter of following the trend. Yao Meng's long black hair was scattered. She bent her knees and half knelt down, stretched out her hand and put it on Musian's face, and her voice was like the sound of nature with a hint of tenderness. For me, the only thing that really matters is him. The pair of beautiful green eyes that seemed to be full of charm stared at Musian, and Musian's figure seemed to be reflected in her eyes. You should understand my feelings, right, Mu Lang? The last name was as lethal as a critical hit, hitting Bai Ruoxi's chest directly, so that her full chest rose and fell slightly. In the past, she called Musian like this in front of other girls, but she didn't expect that she would have such a day. Bai Ruoxi stared at Musian quietly, pinched the hem of her skirt tightly, and her knuckles even turned white due to excessive force. If you have to say, among the women Musian knew, the only two who could legitimately call Musian Mu Lang were Yao Meng. After all, Musian and Yao Meng had been married in Saint King City before. Although they were not married at that time, it was also a marriage witnessed by the world. When thinking of this, Bairuoxi suddenly had a bold idea in his mind. The marriage between Musian and Yao Meng was just a marriage fraud. If he could show Yao Meng the projection stone of his marriage with Musian at this time, wouldn't it be easy to kill this fairy who was so nonchalant at the moment? That's right, as long as there is the projection evidence of marriage, even this woman will have nothing to say. Seeing that the topic was getting increasingly dangerous, Musian suddenly said, Ruoxi, I may need to go to Yizhou with Yao Meng in the next few days. If they don't stop this dangerous topic, the two of them might start fighting in Lianji Peak. But they shouldn't fight, after all, although the sister of the sect leader has never left the back mountain, she should have been secretly paying attention to everything here. For that peerless beauty who has always been shrouded in mystery, Musian has always been in a state of longing, awe and admiration for her. Bairuoxi raised her moist eyes and looked at Musian, and said softly, Is it for the matter of Tegzapil? Musian nodded, This is not only for me, but also for you to be promoted to a nine-tailed fox as soon as possible. In the past, when Bairuoxi heard the three words nine-tailed fox, she would shyly give Musian a resentful look, because she knew that he was targeting the fox-eared girl. However, when she heard nine-tailed fox at this moment, the beautiful eyes of this weak young lady could not help but brighten a little. According to her understanding of the nine-tailed fox, once promoted to the form of the nine-tailed celestial fox, it will be able to freely shuttle between different age groups, and even show fox characteristics if it wants. If Malang can really become a nine-tailed fox. Ahem, since it is to let Malang recover as soon as possible, or even to improve his talent and even realm, there is no other way. Bairuoxi stretched out her slender hand and held one of Musian's small hands, looking down at the handsome young man, and said softly, Malang must protect himself when he is outside. Yao Meng smiled gently, Don't worry, I'm here, there is no need to worry. Bairuoxi glanced at Yao Meng and said nothing. It was because of the Qing Emperor that she was so worried. Don't look at this woman's noble and elegant fairy posture at the moment, but when she was holding Musian for dual cultivation one night some time ago, she was quite reckless. Bairuoxi's eyes fell on Musian's ring and said, My sister Lingxian and I have stored some of the medicinal materials and spiritual minerals needed for the Tegzapil in the ring in advance. Malang must keep the ring properly. Musian smiled and nodded, saying, I know. A few days ago, Ye Lingxian and Bairuoxi went to the restricted area and the Sword Palace to prepare the materials needed for the Tegzapil. Now, with the addition of the demon pill brought by Yao Meng, the materials needed for the Tegzapil have been prepared. At this time, Yao Meng smiled and said, If you have anything to say, you might as well wait until you come back and talk slowly. After that, a teleportation formation appeared under her feet, and the next moment, she turned into a ray of green light and left Lianji Peak. Bairuoxi's beautiful eyes flashed slightly, staring at the formation under Yao Meng's feet, and the excitement that was originally looking forward to Musian's evolution into a nine-tailed celestial fox gradually cooled down. Being able to summon and open the void at will, and even rewrite time, this is a major feature of feathering. Musian watched Yao Meng leave. He waited for a while. After Wei Mengru also stepped into the formation, he said softly, Why is Ruoxi so depressed? Is there something on her mind? Is it because of Yao Meng's ascension? Bairuoxi shook her head gently and whispered, After the Qing Emperor's ascension, Mulang's safety will be more guaranteed. I should be happy. Having said so, she still felt a little wronged in her heart. The beauty who was usually weak pursed her lips at this moment, and her beautiful eyes were wet, which made people feel pity. Well, it made him want to continue bullying Ruoxi in bed, and then watch the beauty biting her lips, with watery eyes, staring at him with grievance and resentment. Mulang, what bad idea are you planning? Bairuoxi stared at Musian with a bit of resentment in her beautiful eyes. Every time Musian showed this fascinated expression, she knew that the other party must be planning something bad. I can't take it anymore. The more I think about it, the more excited I am. I really want to take Ruoxi back and bully her right now. Musian barely gathered his thoughts, coughed lightly, and said, Ruoxi, you should be able to switch to another spiritual consciousness at any time now, right? It's possible, but why did Mulang suddenly ask this? Ruoxi tilted his head slightly and hesitated. I want to give you a unique gift, Musian whispered. Ruoxi's eyes flickered, and he blinked in confusion and asked, what gift? Musian raised his hand to signal Ruoxi to come over. The beauty in the white dress half crouched in front of Musian with her hands on her knees. Her weak temperament made people feel pity at first sight, but her weak beautiful eyes revealed a bit of seductive charm, which was extremely sexy. This is a major feature of Ruoxi's gradually strengthening demonic energy. The two people's eyes intertwined, and their breaths on each other's faces were extremely ambiguous. The next moment, Ruoxi shyly turned her face away, her hair gently fluttering in the cold wind, and whispered, what's the matter? Musian took a half step forward, hugged her slender waist, pressed his chest against hers, and then raised his head and kissed her seductive mouth. At the moment of lips and teeth touching, Ruoxi's beautiful eyes widened slightly, as if she didn't expect Musian to kiss her before leaving. Then, for a moment, Ruoxi suddenly had a clear mind and saw that countless heavenly spiritual energy seemed to surge out of Musian's natural furnace and entered her body. Then, she seemed to vaguely see a luxurious and ancient pure white throne behind Musian, and the second rune appeared in front of the throne. In the heavenly court, the second seat that masters the word soldier. Do you like it? Musian gently stroked Ruoxi's beautiful and charming face and smiled, this seat is my gift to you. What did you talk about with her before? Musian just stepped into the magic circle and left Lianji Peak when he heard a gentle and melodious voice coming from beside him. Yao Meng looked at him with a smile. Nothing, it's just that Ruoxi just returned to the void after refining her spirit, and I was worried that she would continue to practice without properly conditioning her body, so I said a few more words and left some pills, Musian said with a smile. That's not wrong. In a sense, he did leave some elixirs for Ruoxi. After all, the spiritual energy in the natural furnace is much more powerful than ordinary elixirs. Sensing Yao Meng's doubtful eyes, Musian coughed lightly and changed the subject. After we go to Yuzhou, I will go to see Senior Yehuang alone. Yes. Yao Meng nodded slightly and smiled, your little maid and I will rest in her bedroom for a while, but you don't have to be too nervous. I am acquainted with Yehuang. She won't frame you. With her status and position, there is no need for this. She just wants to confirm whether you really have the blood of the three-tailed fox in your body. She will definitely not frame you, but I don't know if she will do anything bad. I don't care, but if I am caught by Yao Meng, I am afraid I will be tied up by the vines of the pure world and taken to the basement. Musian's eyes flickered. What's wrong? Yao Meng looked at him with a smile. Musian came back to his senses, shook his head and smiled, it's okay, I'm just a little worried about what to do if I accidentally offend her when communicating with Senior Yehuang. Yehuang has been in Hedao for more than 2 lifetimes, and she has seen all kinds of people. She won't be so petty with a junior like you. Even if this is not discussed, she won't blame you for my sake. Yao Meng comforted him gently. Musian showed a thoughtful look, and then smiled gently, is that so? Then I feel relieved. But that smile was a little more intriguing. Did Luo Tan really ask to meet him alone to confirm whether he had the body of a three-tailed fox? I'm afraid, not necessarily. Yuzhou's immortal dynasty was founded by Luo Tan after Hedao became famous. It can stand for a long time in Yuzhou, and a large part of the reason is that there are many alchemists in Yuzhou, and even their empress Luo Tan is the only Yehuang in Yuzhou who has the opportunity to refine immortal pills. No one would want to offend an alchemist, let alone an alchemist close to the immortal level. In addition to the ancestral artifact, the all things transformation cauldron, There are too many cultivators in this world who want to find an opportunity to curry favor with the medicine emperor. However, even if you are in the enlightenment realm, you may not be able to meet the medicine emperor. You need to try to find an opportunity to meet the empress through Logotan's maid or even some relationships around the maid. In the past, there were even rumors that if Logotan was willing, he could even cultivate 2 to 3 enlightenment realm or even a Hedeo realm with the pills he made. You know, most of the ancient families can't do this even if they exhaust a lot of resources. After all, even if they have resources, it is difficult for the ancient families to refine perfect grade pills without much loss of medicinal properties like high-quality alchemists like Logotan. As the medicine emperor, she unified Yuzhou and established the immortal dynasty. Every year, she even sent pills that extend life to ordinary mortals. Therefore, the name of the medicine emperor is known and praised by everyone in Yuzhou. On the contrary, her natural furnace cauldron body is often overlooked. It's not that no one has had any bold ideas about her, such as fantasizing about meeting this medicine emperor one day and being favored by the empress of the immortal dynasty. If you can practice dual cultivation with such a beautiful and gorgeous woman, it would be worth it even if you die immediately afterwards. It's just a pity that such a thing is not realistic at all. After all, the empress of the immortal dynasty has no shortage of resources at all, and has seen too many proud sons of heaven. The so-called appearance, talent, and even family background are not worth mentioning in front of her. Besides, it's too difficult to just want to see her. Time passed unknowingly, and 2 days passed in the blink of an eye. It would not take long for the human emperor of Yehua realm to reach Yuzhou in an instant, but he had to take care of Musian, so the time for the 3 of them to rush to Yuzhou was naturally extended a lot. However, Musian was sitting in the phoenix chariot of the 9-headed dragon bird, with a beauty in his arms, and he was quite leisurely. 2 days later, on a sunny afternoon, deep in the Daoka palace, a servant rushed in hurriedly, raised his hand and bowed, saying, "Your Majesty, the Green Emperor has arrived at the hall with others today, and Musian is waiting outside now." In front of the throne, the Empress, who was dressed in a luxurious white dress and had an elegant temperament, raised her bright eyes and whispered, "Is he finally here? Please let him in." After a pause, she seemed to remember something, and sat with her black silk legs crossed, with a faint smile on her face. "Forget it, take him to the bedroom. After all, this is not a good place to talk."